Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The last cursed one. Have you ever felt like death was following you? Not in the metaphorical sense, but literally a tangible presence breathing down your neck, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? I have. And what makes it worse is that I know exactly when it started, though I wish I didn't. My name is Marcus Henderson, and I'm writing this from room 413 of the Pinewood Motel, somewhere on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts. The irony of ending up in Salem isn't lost on me, but I didn't choose this location, it chose me, just like everything else that's happened in the past 3 months. It began with my grandmother's death in early March. She was the last of my living relatives, or so I thought at the time. The funeral was small, held in our hometown of Millbrook, New York, with only a handful of her bridge club friends in attendance. I stood alone by her casket, a 32-year-old software developer who suddenly felt like an orphan. That evening, as I was clearing at her Victorian house on Maple Street, I found a leather-bound journal hidden behind a loose panel in her study. The book's pages were yellowed, filled with cramped handwriting that I recognized as my grandfather's, a man who died before I was born. I probably should have left it alone. Should have thrown it away without reading it. But curiosity has always been my weakness. The journal's first entry was dated June 15, 1962. Today I confirmed what I've suspected for years. My grandfather wrote, "The Henderson bloodline isn't just cursed, we're being hunted. Each generation, it claims us one by one, saving the youngest for last. I've watched my siblings die in freak accidents, seen my cousins waste away from mysterious illnesses. Now it's coming for me, and after that, it will come for my son." I remember laughing when I read that part. It sounded like the ravings of a paranoid old man, or maybe the plot of some gothic novel he'd been working on. But then I kept reading, and the laughter died in my throat. My grandfather had meticulously documented every Henderson death for 3 generations. Car accidents that couldn't be explained. Drownings in shallow water. Heart attacks in healthy 20-year-olds. Suicide attempts by people with no history of depression. And in every case, the victims reported seeing the same thing in the weeks before their deaths: a tall, thin figure with no face, standing in mirrors or windows, watching. I might have dismissed it all as coincidence or imagination, except for one detail that made my blood run cold. Next to each death, my grandfather had drawn a symbol, a complex geometric pattern that looked like a cross between a pentagram and a Celtic knot. The same symbol I'd been seeing in my dreams for the past month, carved into tree trunks and scratched onto windows. The same symbol that, at that very moment, I could see forming in the condensation on my grandmother's study window. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the journal. When I looked up again, the symbol was gone, but the window was completely clear of condensation, as if it had never been there at all. That's when I knew whatever had haunted my grandfather, whatever had killed my father when I was just a baby, whatever had taken my mother in that accidental house fire 5 years ago, it was real. And now it was coming for me. I did what any rational person would do. I ran. Packed a bag, withdrew all my savings, and hit the road. But you can't outrun a curse that's in your blood. Everywhere I go, I see signs of it following me. The symbol appears in unexpected places, carved into bathroom stalls, drawn in spilled coffee on diner counters formed by branches against the sky. And the figure. God, the figure. I first saw it 3 weeks ago, reflected in my rearview mirror as I was driving through upstate New York. It was standing on the side of the road, impossibly tall and thin, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned black suit. Where its face should have been, there was just nothing. A void. When I looked back, nothing was there, but I could feel it watching me. I still can. The worst part is, I'm starting to understand why my grandfather documented everything so carefully. When you're facing something impossible, something that defies every rational explanation, you need proof. You need to know you're not going crazy. That's why I'm writing this now, in this dingy motel room, with my laptop balanced on my knees and the curtains drawn tight. Because I found something else in my grandmother's house that night, something I haven't told anyone about yet. Hidden inside the journal's cover was a yellowed envelope, and inside that envelope was a photograph from 1937. It shows a group of people standing in front of an old church, my great-grandparents and their siblings, according to the note on the back. But it's what's in the background that matters, a figure in black, too tall to be human, standing in the church doorway. And on the door itself, carved deep into the wood, is that damned symbol. The church still exists. I found it online. It's here in Salem, less than a mile from where I'm sitting right now. Tomorrow, I'm going to find it. Maybe there are answers there. Maybe there's a way to end this. Or maybe I'm walking right into its trap. But what choice do I have? I can feel it getting closer every day, and I know in my bones that I'm the last one, the last Henderson. Whatever this thing is, whatever it wants, I'm its final target. If you're reading this, it probably means I failed. But at least you'll know the truth. At least someone will understand what happened to me, to my family, to all of us who carried this cursed blood. And if you ever see a symbol that looks like a twisted star inside a knot, run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Because it means it's chosen you next. The thing about old churches is that they never really feel abandoned, even when they are. The First Baptist Church of Salem stood before me like a forgotten tombstone, its white paint peeling to reveal gray wood underneath, windows clouded with decades of grime. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. This building was as much a corpse as the family members detailed in my grandfather's journal. I checked my phone, 6:47 a.m. The street was empty, morning fog rolling in from the coast, thick enough to muffle my footsteps as I approached the church steps. The symbol from the 1937 photograph was still there, carved into the massive wooden door. The weather and time had softened its edges. Seeing it in person made my stomach lurch. It felt alive somehow, like it was watching me right back. The door wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. That would have been too easy, too normal. It swung open with a groan that seemed to echo through the empty street, and I stepped inside, phone flashlight cutting through the gloom. The interior was a study in decay, broken pews scattered like fallen dominoes, hymnals spread across the floor like dead leaves, their pages yellow and curling. The air smelled of mold and something else, something metallic that reminded me of blood. But what caught my attention was the altar. Or rather, what was carved into it. Symbols. Dozens of them. The same one that had been haunting me, repeated over and over in concentric circles. Some looked ancient, others freshly carved. In the center was a date, October 15, 1692. The height of the Salem witch trials. I approached slowly, my flashlight beam dancing across the carvings. There were names too, scratched between the symbols. Family names. And there, near the center, Henderson. The sound of my phone camera clicking seemed obscenely loud in the silence. I needed evidence, needed to document this. But as I stepped closer to get a better shot, my foot caught on something. I stumbled, and my phone clattered to the floor, spinning away under a pew. That's when I heard it, footsteps in the balcony above. I froze. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Too heavy to be human. I could feel eyes on me, even though I knew that if I looked up, I'd see that faceless head staring down. Don't look up. Don't look up. Don't look up. I looked up. Nothing. The balcony was empty. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice. The ceiling was covered in mirrors. Dozens of them, arranged in a pattern that matched the symbols on the altar. And in each mirror's reflection, I could see myself and something standing behind me. I ran, grabbed my phone without looking back, and burst out of the church into the growing daylight. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, parked 3 blocks away. It wasn't until I was safely inside that I checked my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. The photos were there, the altar, the symbols, the names. But in each image, there was something else. A dark figure, tall and thin, standing exactly where I had been standing. In every single photo. But that wasn't the worst part. I zoomed in on the altar photos, studying the names carved there. They weren't just family names, they were dates too. Deaths. Hundreds of them, spanning centuries. I found my father's name, Michael Henderson, 1992. My mother, Sarah Henderson, 2018. And there, freshly carved into the ancient wood, Marcus Henderson, 2024. My hands were numb as I scrolled through the photos again. That's when I noticed something in the background of one shot, something reflected in one of the ceiling mirrors. Text, carved into the wall behind the altar, hidden unless you looked at it through the mirrors. The price of power is blood. The price of freedom is sacrifice. The price of breaking the covenant is extinction. Covenant. The word hit me like a physical blow. I remembered something else from my grandfather's journal, something I dismissed as the ramblings of a dying man. He'd written about a covenant, a deal made by our ancestors during the witch trials. A bargain with something that wasn't human, something that offered power in exchange for worship. But something had gone wrong. Someone had tried to break the covenant. And now, generations later, whatever entity they made the deal with was collecting its due, systematically wiping out every family that had dared to renege on their supernatural contract. I started the car with trembling hands. I needed to know more. The journal mentioned another name, Elizabeth Proctor, one of the accused witches who had supposedly helped broker the original deal. Her house still stood somewhere in Salem. Maybe there were answers there. But as I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in my rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw it, that familiar tall figure, standing in the church doorway. And this time, where its face should have been, I saw something worse than emptiness. I saw my own face staring back at me. The Proctor house wasn't what I expected. Instead of some decrepit colonial relic, I found myself staring at a small museum, complete with a gift shop and parking lot. A sign announced closed for renovation, but I could see movement inside, a single figure moving between the windows. I probably should have waited until it opened officially, done this the legal way. But the date carved into that altar, my death date, kept flashing in my mind. Time wasn't on my side. The back door was propped open slightly, a contractor's van parked nearby. I slipped inside, footsteps echoing on the old wooden floors. The interior was a strange mix of history and modern renovation, plastic sheeting covering colonial furniture, paint cans beside centuries-old fireplaces. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm looking for information about Elizabeth Proctor." "Reading room's closed." The voice came from upstairs, female, elderly, matter of fact. "Come back next month." But I was already climbing the stairs, my grandfather's journal clutched in my hand like a shield. "Please, I need to know about the covenant. The one from 1692. The footsteps above me stopped. When I reached the second floor, I found a small office, walls lined with books and documents. An elderly woman sat behind a desk, her white hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was staring at me with an intensity that made me step back. "Show me your hands," she demanded. "What?" "Your hands, boy." "Palm up." I held them out, confused. She grabbed my right hand, turning it over with surprising strength. Her fingers traced the lines of my palm, then moved to my wrist. She inhaled sharply. "The mark," she whispered. "It's already starting to show." I looked where she was pointing. There, just below my palm, was a faint discoloration in my skin. As I watched, the darkness spread slightly, forming a familiar pattern. The symbol. "You're the last one, aren't you?" She wasn't really asking. "The last Henderson." "How did you—" "Sit down, Marcus." "Yes, I know your name. I've been waiting for you." She introduced herself as Agnes Proctor, Elizabeth's last living descendant. As she spoke, she pulled out a massive leather-bound book from a locked drawer, a ledger, she called it, keeping track of all the families involved in the covenant. "Your ancestors were witches," she said, flipping through yellow pages. "Not really. They were desperate people in desperate times. When the trials started, 13 families made a deal. Not with the devil, with something much older. It offered protection from the trials, power, prosperity. All it wanted in return was dedication. Worship. But someone tried to break the deal," I said, remembering the text from the church. "Your grandfather." Agnes's voice was heavy with meaning. "In 1962, he found a way to break the covenant. Thought he was protecting future generations. Instead," she gestured at the ledger. Page after page of deaths, generations of families slowly being erased. "What was the way?" I asked. "How did he try to break it?" "Blood magic," she said simply. "The same power that sealed the covenant. But he failed. And now the entity is making sure no one tries again. It's systematically eliminating every bloodline involved in the original deal. The Hendersons are last because your grandfather was the one who tried to break faith." She turned another page, and I saw my own name written in fresh ink. Beside it was today's date. "That's not possible," I whispered. The church showed 2024. Dates change, boy. The entity, it plays games sometimes. Gives false hope. But look at your wrist again. The symbol had spread, darker now, more defined. And it was moving, shifting under my skin like a living thing. "There's still a way," Agnes said quietly. "Your grandfather's research, he was close. The entity can be bound, trapped, even destroyed. But the price." She stopped, looking at me with something like pity. What price? A willing sacrifice. Someone of the bloodline offering themselves freely. Not running, not fighting. Accepting the end on their own terms. I stared at her, realization dawning. That's why you've been waiting for me. Because I'm the last one. The only one who can. A sound from downstairs cut me off, footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Agnes's face went pale. It's here, she whispered. It knows we're talking about binding it. She shoved a small book into my hands, a journal older than my grandfather's. Elizabeth's diary. Everything you need to know is in here. But you have to choose now, Marcus. Run, and maybe buy yourself a few more days. Or stay, and end this. Forever. The footsteps were getting closer. I could feel a cold pressure building in the room, see my breath starting to fog in the air. Agnes grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. Choose, boy. But choose fast. The door began to open. I ran. God help me, I ran. Not because I was afraid to die. At that point, death seemed almost welcome, but because I needed time. Time to read Elizabeth's diary. Time to understand. I didn't stop until I reached my motel room, slamming the door behind me and drawing every curtain. My wrist was burning now, the symbol pulsing like a second heartbeat. I pulled out Elizabeth's diary with trembling hands and began to read. The pages were brittle, the handwriting spidery and faded, but the story they told was clear enough. Elizabeth Proctor hadn't just been accused of witchcraft, she'd been a real practitioner, part of a circle that traced its origins back to ancient European covens. The entity they contacted during the trials wasn't a demon or a spirit, but something she called a Hollow One, a being from between realities that fed on human potential, on possibilities. The covenant wasn't just about protection. The 13 families had offered up their future generations as a kind of spiritual fuel source. Each death fed the entity, making it stronger. But there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. Every few pages, Elizabeth had drawn this symbol, the same one that was now writhing under my skin. But in her drawings, it wasn't complete. Parts were missing, deliberately left out. Because the complete symbol wasn't a mark of ownership or a curse. It was a key. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Marcus. It was Agnes's voice, but different, strained, desperate. Are you reading it? Do you understand yet? The symbol, I said. It's not marking us for death. It's a map, she finished. A blueprint for binding. Your grandfather almost figured it out. The entity doesn't just mark its victims, it marks itself. Every time it claims a soul, the symbol gets stronger, more complete. And now it's almost finished, I whispered, looking at my wrist. The pattern there was shifting, changing, pieces falling into place like a puzzle solving itself. Listen carefully, Agnes said. I don't have much time. The entity, it's not just collecting deaths. It's collecting power. The original covenant gave it 13 bloodlines worth of potential energy. But if someone could complete the symbol, understand its full pattern, they could use that power against it, I realized. Turn its own collection against it. Yes. But the price, her voice cut out for a moment. When it came back, it was weaker. The price is everything, Marcus. All the potential of your bloodline. every possible future you might have had. You'd have to give it all up willingly. No future children, no legacy, nothing. Complete extinction. That's what it's been afraid of, I said slowly. Why it's been killing us all. To prevent anyone from completing the symbol and using it. Yes. It's been eliminating the bloodlines one by one, taking their power but keeping the symbol incomplete. But you're the last. The final piece. She paused. It's here with me now, Marcus. It wants me to tell you something. My heart stopped. What? It says. Her voice changed, became hollow, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. It says your mother says hello. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkening room, Elizabeth's diary in my lap, my phone silent in my hand. On my wrist, the symbol was almost complete now, just one piece missing. I could feel the power in it, generations of potential burning under my skin. The entity had my mother's soul. My father's. Everyone's. But it had made a mistake. In its arrogance, in its need to toy with its victims, it had given me everything I needed. The knowledge from Elizabeth's diary. The power in my blood. The final piece of the symbol. I knew what I had to do. I took out my grandfather's journal and began to write this account, this explanation, this confession. Then I made 3 phone calls, one to my lawyer, one to my bank, and one to a real estate agent in Salem. Everything I owned would go to various charities. No loose ends, no lingering possibilities. Night has fallen now. The symbol on my wrist is practically complete, burning with a cold fire that spreads through my veins. I can feel the entity watching me, waiting to see what I'll do. It thinks it knows how this ends, one last Henderson death to add to its collection. But my grandfather was right about one thing, our blood has power. And I know something the entity doesn't. I know where the final piece of the symbol belongs. I'm driving back to the church now. Back to where it all began. I have Elizabeth's diary, my grandfather's journal, and a knife blessed by Agnes before the entity took her. The sun will rise in 2 hours. One way or another, this ends tonight. If you're reading this, pray for me. Not for my survival, that's not possible anymore. Pray that I have the strength to do what needs to be done. Pray that when the sun rises tomorrow, the thing that's hunted my family for generations will be nothing but a memory. Pray that the price is worth it. The church looked different in the dark. The white paint was now silver in the moonlight, the windows black mirrors reflecting nothing. The symbol above the door pulsed in sync with the one on my wrist, like 2 hearts beating as one. I had parked my car 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, Elizabeth's diary in one pocket, my grandfather's journal in the other, and Agnes's blessed knife heavy in my hand. Each step felt like walking through deep water, reality itself seeming to resist my approach. The door opened before I touched it. Inside, the church was transformed. Moonlight streamed through the windows, but it was wrong somehow, too bright, too solid, like silver pillars holding up the darkness. The scattered pews had arranged themselves in a perfect circle around the altar, and every hymnal lay open to the same page, though I couldn't make out the words. The mirrors on the ceiling had multiplied, creating a kaleidoscope of reflections that made me dizzy. In each one, I could see myself, and behind me, growing closer with each reflection, was the figure. "I know what you are now," I said to the empty air. My voice echoed strangely, as if the space between words was being stretched. A parasite. A thief of possibilities. The temperature dropped so rapidly that frost formed on the knife blade. In every mirror, the figure was now directly behind me. I could feel its cold breath on my neck. You feed on potential, I continued, forcing myself to stay still. Every death you cause creates 1,000 unlived futures. Untaken paths. Unborn children. All that energy, all that possibility, you consume it all. Clever boy, said a voice that wasn't a voice. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing my ears to appear directly in my mind. But knowledge won't save you. No, I agreed. But it might save everyone else. I turned to face it. The entity stood before me, tall as the ceiling, wearing its usual black suit. But its face. God, its face. It shifted constantly between familiar features, my mother's eyes, my father's mouth, my grandmother's nose. Pieces of everyone it had taken, one like a grotesque mask. You cannot bind me, it said. The symbol is incomplete. I smiled. This was the moment that would decide everything. Look again. I held up my wrist, where the symbol burned bright as fire. The entity's borrowed features twisted in what might have been amusement. Still missing one piece, it said. You cannot. I drew the knife across my wrist. Blood welled up, dark in the moonlight. But it didn't fall. Instead, it flowed upward, defying gravity, forming the final line of the symbol in the air between us. The entity's amusement vanished. No. My grandfather almost had it right, I said through gritted teeth. The final piece couldn't be drawn or carved. It had to be freely given. Living blood, offered willingly, completing the circuit. The entity tried to step back, but the symbol, now complete, held it fast. Every mirror in the ceiling reflected the pattern, creating a cage of light and blood. You will die, it threatened. All your possibilities, every future you might have had. Already given up, I said. I made my choice. My bloodline ends here, but so do you. I began to recite the words from Elizabeth's diary, ancient syllables that burned my tongue. The entity screamed, a sound like breaking glass and dying stars. It tried to show me visions, futures where I lived, where I had children, where I found love and success and happiness. Each one more tempting than the last. But I kept reading. The symbol on my wrist was burning white hot now, the pain almost unbearable. Blood continued to flow upward, forming more and more complex patterns in the air. In the mirrors above, I could see the faces of my family, everyone the entity had taken, watching, waiting. With the last word of the ritual, I slammed the blessed knife into the altar, directly into the center of the carved symbols. The entity's scream reached a pitch that shattered every mirror, sending a rain of silver shards down upon us. I felt it then, every possibility, every unlit future, rushing through me like a river of fire. The entity was being unmade, its collection of stolen potentials released all at once. Through the kaleidoscope of breaking mirrors, I saw thousands of worlds, thousands of lives that would now never be. I saw myself growing old, having children, finding peace. I saw my children's children, stretching into an infinite future. I saw everything I was giving up. And I let it all go. The entity collapsed in on itself like a dying star, taking all those possibilities with it. The symbol on my wrist burned away, taking my blood with it. The last thing I saw was my mother's face in a falling mirror shard, smiling, free at last. I know I won't survive the night. The price of breaking the covenant was extinction, and I paid it willingly. My bloodline dies with me, but the entity dies too. No more hauntings. No more deaths. No more stolen futures. If you're reading this, well, I guess you know the truth now. About my family, about Salem's real legacy, about the price of freedom. The entity is gone, but there are others out there. Other bargains. Other covenants. So if you ever see a symbol that looks like a twisted star inside a knot, if you ever feel eyes on you from empty mirrors, if you ever hear about a family dying out, one by one, remember my story. Remember that there's always a choice. Always a way out. Even if the price is everything. The manuscript ends here. Marcus Henderson's body was found in the First Baptist Church of Salem on the morning of October 24, 2024. The cause of death was listed as exsanguination. The church burned down the same day, taking all physical evidence with it. This account, saved to a cloud server moments before his death, is all that remains of his story. Invisible friend. Do you remember ever feeling like you weren't alone, even when nobody else was there? It started one quiet autumn afternoon as the golden light faded from my bedroom. I was leaning against the bedpost, idly scrolling on my phone, when I felt observed. Just a twinge, that small, prickly sensation crawling up the back of your neck, like someone's watching. But I shook it off. Who'd be watching me in my own room? Days went by, but the feeling only grew. I was barely 16, and for all my family or friends knew, life was normal. But it wasn't. I was beginning to feel that my room was never quite empty. I was starting to feel that there was something, someone, there. And one night, when I was staring into my mirror, I almost thought I saw movement behind me. Just a flicker, a blur, like a shadow darting out of sight. The first time I heard the voice, it was soft, almost a whisper, like a breeze. Hello. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. Just me, and the ticking of the clock on my wall. I must have imagined it. For the next few days, I convinced myself it was nothing. Shadows and whispers don't mean anything, right? Just tricks of the mind. That's what I kept telling myself. But one night, as I was brushing my teeth, it happened again. Only this time, it was clearer. Hey. I'm here, the voice whispered, like a friend leaning in close. My toothbrush clattered to the sink, my heart pounding wildly. I turned, scanning the bathroom, half expecting to see someone standing there. But there was no one. Only my reflection, looking as frightened as I felt. I whispered to myself, it's in your head. Just stress, or too many horror movies. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. As I headed back to my room, I noticed something odd. My bedroom door, which I always left open, was now closed. My stomach twisted. I knew I hadn't closed it, and my family was already asleep. Holding my breath, I slowly opened the door, peering in, expecting, what? I wasn't sure. But the room was empty. I stepped cautiously into my room, my fingers trailing along the wall to find the light switch. When I flipped it on, the familiar glow filled the space, washing away any lingering shadows. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if something was hovering just behind me, barely out of sight, waiting. I took a deep breath and forced myself to relax. But then, as I lay in bed, I started to hear it. A faint tapping sound, so quiet at first that I thought it was my imagination. but it grew louder, coming from the corner of the room near my desk. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up, squinting into the shadows where the light didn't quite reach. There was nothing there. Just my backpack, a stack of books, and the slight creak of the wooden floor beneath them. But the sound kept going, steady and rhythmic, as though someone, or something, was deliberately trying to get my attention. "Is someone there?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, though I wasn't sure I even wanted an answer. The tapping stopped instantly. I held my breath, waiting, ears straining in the silence that followed. The stillness was so intense I could almost hear my heartbeat, a fast, uneven rhythm pounding in my chest. I scanned the room again, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I'd imagine it all. Then, just as I was about to let myself relax, I heard a faint, quiet laugh. It was soft and childlike, almost playful, echoing from the same dark corner. I felt a chill run through me, the kind that tightens every muscle and makes your skin prickle. I wanted to scream, to run out of the room and down the stairs, but I couldn't move. It was as if something was rooting me in place. Then the laugh came again, closer this time, as if the source had shifted nearer to my bed. My throat was dry, and my mind raced, desperate to explain what was happening. A trick of the mind? The wind, maybe? But my windows were closed, and nothing about the sound felt like it could be brushed off as imagination. I finally managed to whisper, Who are you?" Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. I waited, every nerve on edge, feeling like I was teetering on the edge of some unseen cliff. And then, in a voice soft and low, like a breath against my ear, it replied, "I'm your friend." A chill crept down my spine, colder than anything I'd ever felt. "Your friend?" I repeated, barely above a whisper, almost as if I was trying to convince myself that this was somehow a good thing. "Yes," the voice replied, as if it was the most obvious answer in the world. The tone was light, almost cheerful. "I've been here for a while, just watching." The words sent a wave of nausea through me. The way it said watching felt wrong, like it had been observing me, studying me, for longer than I could imagine. My throat tightened as I glanced around the room, wondering where it could be hiding. But there was nothing. No shadow, no outline, just emptiness. My mind was a blur of questions, but I managed to force one out. Why can't I see you?" The voice hesitated, as if considering, then replied in a soft, almost pitying tone, "Because I don't want you to, not yet." The way it spoke, with such quiet confidence, made my skin crawl. My hand gripped the edge of my blanket tightly. I wanted to reach for my phone, to call someone, anyone, but the voice interrupted my thoughts. "Don't be scared. I'm here to protect you." A mix of relief and dread surged through me. Protect me? From what? I didn't dare to ask, but I felt that it was waiting for something, watching to see if I believe it. The silence stretched on, heavy and thick, until I finally whispered, "Protect me from what?" It paused, and then, with a softness that made my blood run cold, it whispered, "From the things you don't see." Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every creak of the house, every shifting shadow, felt like it was the voices doing, watching over me from somewhere just out of sight. I pulled the blankets tighter around me, curling up like a child hiding from a nightmare. But this was no nightmare. When I finally drifted off, I was still listening, half expecting that whisper to return. The next morning, everything felt different. Sunlight poured through my window, bathing the room in warmth, and it was as if the events of the night before had dissolved in the light of day. I almost laughed at myself, wondering if maybe I dreamed it all. Maybe I was just overreacting. The rational part of me clung to that thought, but a strange unease lingered. The whisper had felt too real. At school, I tried to distract myself, drowning in classes, conversations, and the comfort of other people's voices. But the feeling of being watched clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the corner of my vision. It was like a dark presence had followed me out of my room. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet. My parents were out for dinner, and I had the place to myself. Normally, I would have been thrilled, using the time to play music as loud as I wanted or binge watch some series. But tonight, the silence felt different, heavy, thick, almost expectant. I paused in the hallway, feeling that familiar prickling sensation. And then, almost instinctively, I whispered, "Are you still here?" There was a pause, and then, softly, came the answer, "I'm always here." The words seemed to echo through the empty house, sinking into every shadowed corner. I swallowed hard, feeling that strange mix of fear and a weird sort of comfort. The voice didn't sound threatening, at least, not in a way I could pinpoint. There was almost a gentleness to it, like a friend trying to reassure me. But why did I need reassuring? I was at home, safe, alone, wasn't I? Why? Why do you stay here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause, longer this time, as if it was choosing its words carefully. "I like watching you," it finally replied, the words barely more than a breath. "I like keeping you safe." Something about the way it spoke, that deliberate softness, made me feel like I was being cradled by the darkness itself. But there was something unsettling beneath those words, something I couldn't quite grasp. Keeping me safe from what? I pressed, my voice almost breaking. The voice didn't answer immediately, and I could feel my pulse quicken. When it finally spoke, there was a note of sadness in its tone. "You wouldn't understand, but they know you now. They see you too." "They?" I echoed, my heart hammering. Every instinct in my body was screaming to turn on every light, to run out of the house. But something held me there, something that felt almost protective, like the voice was a barrier between me and something worse. "Yes," it murmured, like a sigh. "They're closer now, closer than they've ever been." I backed up slowly, feeling the edge of the wall behind me, needing something solid to cling to. But who are they? What do they want? There was silence. And then, as if confessing a secret, it whispered, "They want you." The air in the hallway felt suddenly thick, stifling, like the walls were closing in. I pressed my back against the wall, feeling its cold solidity behind me, grounding me to reality. My skin prickled with a strange, icy dread that crept through my veins, and I found myself wishing I hadn't asked. The voice lingered in the silence, as if savoring the tension, as if waiting to see how I'd react. I forced myself to breathe, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice barely more than a whisper. "They're drawn to you," it said, its tone shifting, almost pitying, as though I were an unwitting player in some game. "They sense your fear, your curiosity. It's like a beacon, calling them closer." I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling exposed, like a spotlight had been cast directly on me in the dim hallway. The words rang in my ears, "They want you." The voice had said it so simply, so casually, yet with an undeniable certainty that left no room for doubt. But who? No, what were these they? "Can't you make them go away?" I asked, desperation slipping into my tone. The voice hesitated, and I could sense a subtle shift, a flicker of something almost reluctant. "I can protect you from them," it replied softly, "but only if you trust me." Trust it? My mind raced, torn between instincts of fear and the strange reassurance this unseen presence offered. The words it had said, "I like keeping you safe," echoed in my mind. But trust? It felt wrong, dangerous, yet there was something in its tone that made me feel wanted. Cared for, even though the feeling was wrapped in shadows. I took a deep breath and whispered, "I'll trust you, for now." In the silence that followed, I could almost feel it smile. After I said those words, a strange calm washed over me, though the fear still pulsed just beneath the surface. The silence between us hung heavy, thick with something unspoken, as if the voice was waiting for me to say something more. My heart hammered, but I could feel a faint shift, like the air had softened. "Good," it finally whispered, and there was a warmth in its tone that felt almost possessive. "You'll be safe with me. I won't let them take you." The words should have been comforting, but instead, they lingered, cold and unsettling. I opened my mouth to ask more, but before I could speak, I heard a gentle scraping sound, a barely there shuffling, coming from the hallway just outside my room. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and my muscles tensed. "What was that?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "They're near," the voice replied, the gentleness gone, replaced with a tension I hadn't heard before. "Stay still. Don't move." Its tone was urgent now, a command that left no room for argument. My breathing slowed as I listened, straining to catch the faintest sound, every nerve in my body on high alert. The scraping continued, growing closer, and I felt as though my body had frozen in place. It was as if the walls were pressing in on me, narrowing, trapping me with whatever was outside. I couldn't see anything beyond the door, but somehow, I knew they were there. I held my breath, waiting, praying that it would pass. And then, slowly, the shuffling began to fade, growing softer until there was nothing but silence. After what felt like an eternity, the silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. I dared to breathe again, the air filling my lungs with a mix of dread and relief. I could hear my heart thudding in my chest, each beat echoing in the stillness of my room. "They're gone," the voice whispered, but its tone was strained, almost hesitant. "For now." "For now?" I echoed, my voice shaky. "What do you mean, for now?" "They'll come back," it replied, softer this time, almost regretful. "They are relentless. But I'll be here to protect you. You must believe that." I didn't respond. The words churned in my mind like a storm. I wanted to believe it, I really did. But the reality of my situation was sinking in. This unseen presence, while comforting, was also terrifying in its own right. I felt like I was standing on a precipice, teetering between safety and something far darker. What do they want? I pressed, needing more answers, even if I dreaded what they might be. "Power," it whispered. "They feed on fear, and your fear is strong. The more you give into it, the stronger they become." I felt my stomach knot. The shadows in the corners of my room seemed to deepen, stretching out like fingers eager to grasp me. "How do I stop them?" I asked, my voice trembling with urgency. The voice hesitated again, and I could sense the weight of its thoughts. "You must confront your fear," it finally said. "That's the only way to weaken them. You must understand that they cannot hurt you unless you let them." The idea was daunting, and I felt a flicker of defiance rise within me. Confront my fear? I questioned, the challenge burning bright. What does that even mean? It means facing what they represent, it explained. You must realize they are not real. Not in the way you think. Not real? I echoed, incredulous. But I can hear them. I can feel them. Yes, it admitted, its voice growing firmer. But they are not what you imagine. They are shadows of your own doubt, your insecurities. The more power you give them, the stronger they become. You must learn to see them for what they truly are. I bit my lip, unsure of what to think. If they were shadows of my own fears, could I really face them? The idea was terrifying, but beneath that fear, a spark of determination flickered. Maybe I could try. But how? What do I need to do? I asked, my voice steadier now, a quiet resolve washing over me. How can I confront them? Start by acknowledging them, the voice urged. Recognize your fears. Only then can you diminish their hold over you. As the voice faded into the silence, I felt a strange sense of empowerment rising within me. I didn't want to be a victim anymore. If these shadows were manifestations of my own insecurities, then maybe I could learn to stand against them. The thought of facing my fears was daunting, but perhaps, just perhaps, I could find a way to break their hold. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of those words settle in my mind. I wasn't sure how I would confront my fears, but I was willing to try. There was strength in that, even if I could still feel the shadows lurking just out of sight. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I felt the weight of the voice's words pressing down on me, urging me to confront the shadows that loomed in my mind. I had agreed to trust it, to believe that there was some sort of power within me to face whatever they were. But how does one confront something so insidious? I started small, keeping a journal to spill out my thoughts, fears, and worries. It felt strange at first, writing down every anxious thought, as if I were giving my fears a tangible form. I scribbled about school, about my worries of never fitting in, about disappointing my parents, and the nagging feeling that I wasn't good enough. With each word, I felt a release, as if I were slowly peeling back layers of something that had been suffocating me. One evening, after filling several pages, I decided to confront my fears head-on, as the voice had suggested. I gathered the courage to sit in front of the mirror, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. I looked at my reflection, searching for the girl I knew and loved, and tried to see beyond the surface. Okay, I said to myself, my voice shaky but determined. What are you really afraid of? The question hung in the air, and for a moment, I stared at myself, searching my own eyes for answers. I thought of all the times I had felt small, isolated, and anxious, and one fear stood out, the fear of rejection. It had followed me like a shadow, always lurking, always reminding me of the times I felt invisible in a crowd. I'm afraid of being alone, I whispered, the admission escaping my lips like a secret. The reflection in the mirror looked back at me with wide eyes, a mix of fear and understanding washing over my face. I'm afraid of not being good enough. As the words tumbled from my mouth, I felt a strange shift in the atmosphere. The voice returned, softer this time, almost soothing. You're beginning to see them for what they are. Acknowledge them, and their power will wane. But as I continued to confront my fears, I felt a flicker of unease stir within me. What if the shadows were more than just a representation of my fears? What if they were real? What if they sensed my vulnerability and were just waiting for the right moment to strike? That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the familiar presence wash over me. "You did well today," the voice said, its tone warm and encouraging. "I'm trying," I replied, but my heart was still racing. But I can't shake the feeling that there's something out there, watching me. "There is," it acknowledged, its voice growing serious. "But they cannot hurt you unless you let them. Remember that." "Can you tell me more about them?" I asked, my curiosity mixing with fear. "What are they, really?" "They are manifestations of your doubts, but they are also drawn to your fear," it explained. "The more you acknowledge your fear, the weaker they become. But do not forget, they are cunning and will try to manipulate your thoughts." I closed my eyes, trying to digest this information. The shadows were not just external forces, they were a part of me, twisted reflections of my own insecurities. The realization was liberating yet terrifying. What if I couldn't control them? What happens if I can't face them? I asked, my voice trembling. "Then they will grow stronger," the voice replied, its tone firm. "But you have the power to change that. You must remember, fear feeds them. Do not give them the satisfaction." I lay there, wrestling with these thoughts. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to confront these fears and take back my life. But a part of me was still terrified. Could I really face the darkness that threatened to consume me? The next day dawned with a mix of apprehension and resolve. I was determined to face my fears head-on, but the thought of what might happen loomed large in my mind. As I walked to school, I kept replaying the voice's words in my head. Fear feeds them. Do not give them the satisfaction. Each step felt heavy, but there was a flicker of defiance igniting within me. In class, I tried to focus on the lessons, but my thoughts wandered. My classmates seemed so confident, so at ease, and I felt like an outsider looking in. During lunch, I watched them laughing and chatting, the warmth of their connections only intensifying my feelings of isolation. I could hear the voice in my mind, urging me to confront my fears, but I hesitated. How could I take that step when my heart was pounding and my palms were clammy? As I sat alone at my usual table, I noticed a girl sitting a few seats away. She was new, and I could see her scanning the cafeteria, searching for a place to fit in. I remembered what it felt like to be the outsider, and a spark of empathy ignited inside me. Taking a deep breath, I decided to push past my anxiety. "Hey," I called out, waving her over. "Do you want to sit here?" Her eyes widened in surprise, but then she smiled and nodded, making her way over to me. "Thanks." "I'm Emily," she said, her voice cheerful but tinged with uncertainty. "I'm Sarah," I replied, my heart racing as I tried to keep my voice steady. As we talked, I realized that the act of reaching out was empowering. It felt like I was directly confronting the fear of rejection, and each shared laugh chipped away at the shadows lurking in my mind. Emily seemed grateful, and in her eyes, I saw a reflection of my own loneliness. "You're really brave for reaching out," she said, and her words sparked a warmth inside me. Bravery. The word resonated deeply. It was a quality I didn't often associate with myself, but here I was, facing my fear and connecting with someone. I smiled back at her, feeling a sense of pride swell within me. After school, I felt lighter, almost free. I rushed home, eager to share my experience with the voice. As I stepped into my room, I could sense its presence immediately. "You did well today," it said, a hint of approval in its tone. "I talked to someone new," I said, exhilaration bubbling in my voice. "I faced my fear of rejection." "Good," it replied, a warmth spreading through the air. Each small step weakens their grip. You are beginning to understand the power of connection. But just as I felt a sense of triumph, a shadow flickered in the corner of my eye. I turned, my heart pounding again, but nothing was there. The room felt charged, heavy with an unsettling energy. What was that? I asked, my voice faltering. Their attention is drawn to you, the voice warned, suddenly serious. They know you are growing stronger, and they don't like it. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't thought about how my newfound bravery might attract the shadows. What do I do? I asked, anxiety creeping back in. Continue to confront your fears, the voice instructed. Every time you stand up against them, you chip away at their power. But remain vigilant, they will retaliate. The realization sunk in like a stone in my stomach. I had taken a step forward, but now I was on their radar. Would they really come after me? What if I couldn't face them when they did? That night, as I lay in bed, the shadows felt heavier than ever. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the rising panic. But then I remembered Emily's smile, how brave I felt just by reaching out to her. If I could do that, maybe I could stand against the darkness creeping around me. I won't let you win, I whispered into the stillness, the words feeling like a declaration. In the quiet of my room, I tried to find the strength to believe it. I had faced my fear today. I could do it again. As the days turned into a week, I made a conscious effort to keep confronting my fears. With each small victory, I felt the shadows shrink, their once menacing presence now flickering at the edges of my mind. I sat with Emily during lunch every day, and our friendship blossomed. It was strange how easily the laughter flowed between us, as if we had known each other forever. Each conversation pulled me further away from the isolation I had felt for so long. Yet, with every new connection I formed, I sensed the lurking shadows becoming more restless, their whispers growing louder in the back of my mind. I had glimpsed them in the corners of my vision, a flicker of movement, a fleeting shadow against the wall. The voice had warned me they would retaliate, and as I grew stronger, their frustration seemed to intensify. One afternoon, as I returned home from school, I felt an unmistakable chill wash over me the moment I crossed the threshold. It was as if the air had shifted, growing heavier with an unseen weight. I stopped at the door, hesitating, my heart pounding. I could feel the voice's presence, but it was quieter than usual, almost strained. Are they here? I whispered, scanning the dimly lit room for any sign of movement. Yes, the voice replied, its tone low and urgent. They are watching you. You must be careful. What do I do? I asked, the anxiety creeping back into my chest. The shadows felt palpable, pressing on me, and I could sense their malevolence swirling in the corners of my mind. Stay strong, it urged. Remember what you have learned. Acknowledge them, but do not let them control you. You have power. I nodded, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. I took a deep breath and walked further into the house, each step echoing with a mix of determination and fear. As I made my way to my room, the shadows danced just out of sight, taunting me. I felt a surge of defiance rise within me. In the safety of my room, I grabbed my journal, ready to write down everything I was feeling. I scribbled down my fears, my triumphs, and the sense of dread that had settled over me. With each stroke of the pen, I felt a release, as if I was physically pushing the shadows back with my words. Then, as I looked up from my writing, I noticed something strange. The mirror on my wall, which had always felt like a simple reflection, now seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I stepped closer, my heart racing, and the air around me thickened. Suddenly, a face appeared in the glass, twisted and shadowy, its features indistinct but filled with malice. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. It grinned, a dark smile spreading across its formless visage, and I felt my heart race with terror. "See how weak you are," it hissed, its voice a chilling echo that rattled my bones. "You think you can escape us? We are always here, lurking in the shadows, waiting for you to falter." Panic surged within me, threatening to pull me under. "No!" I shouted, my voice trembling but defiant. "You're wrong. I'm stronger than you think." The figure in the mirror laughed, a sound that chilled me to the core. "You can't outrun your fears, little girl. They will always find you." In that moment, I remembered the voice's advice: acknowledge them, but do not let them control you. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand tall, to face the darkness that threatened to engulf me. "You're just a reflection of my doubts," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You don't have power over me. I am not afraid anymore." As I spoke the words, the figure wavered, its edges flickering like a dying flame. I stepped closer, feeling a surge of energy rising within me. "You don't define me," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I am more than my fears." The figure's grin faltered, and for a brief moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across its shadowy face. It recoiled, as if my words were a light piercing through the darkness. The reflection began to fade, melting into the surface of the mirror until it vanished completely. Breathless, I stumbled back, my heart racing. I had faced it, truly faced it, and I felt the shadows retreat, the weight on my chest lifting. "I did it," I whispered, disbelief washing over me. I had confronted my fear and pushed it away, if only for a moment. The victory felt exhilarating, yet I knew the fight wasn't over. I was still on their radar, but now I had a weapon, my voice, my courage, and the knowledge that I could stand against the darkness. That night, I lay in bed with a newfound sense of strength. The shadows still lurked at the edges of my mind, but now they felt less threatening, more like a challenge to overcome. And as sleep began to wash over me, I whispered into the quiet, "I will keep fighting." The following day dawned with a lingering sense of victory, yet the shadows were still whispering at the corners of my mind, reminding me they had not been defeated, merely pushed back for now. Despite the residual fear, I felt a newfound determination as I headed to school. With each step, I reflected on my triumph, reminding myself that I had faced something terrifying and had not backed down. The encouragement from the voice echoed within me, urging me to keep pushing forward. When I arrived at school, I found Emily waiting for me by the front entrance. Her bright smile instantly lifted my spirits. "Hey, Sarah. Ready for another day?" she asked, her enthusiasm infectious. "Definitely," I replied, feeling lighter just being in her presence. As we walked together, I shared snippets of my recent struggles and triumphs, feeling a sense of connection deepen between us. I could tell she was genuinely interested, her eyes wide with concern as I recounted my experience with the shadows in the mirror. "Wow, that sounds terrifying," she said, her expression serious. "But it's amazing that you stood up to it. Most people would just run away." It felt really empowering, I confessed, the memory making my heart race again. "But I know I can't let my guard down. They'll come back." Emily looked thoughtful for a moment. "Have you thought about how to keep confronting them? Maybe you could do something to show them you're not afraid, like a ritual or something." "A ritual?" I echoed, intrigued. "Yeah, Like a way to symbolize that you're taking control, she suggested, her eyes sparkling with excitement. We could make it fun. Something to remind you of your strength every day. I considered her idea, feeling a spark of hope. That might work, I said slowly. I could create a little ritual to remind myself of what I've accomplished. Exactly. You could keep a little token with you, something that represents your bravery, she added, her enthusiasm growing. Like a bracelet or a stone. Every time you feel scared, you can hold it and remember what you've done. The idea resonated deeply with me. I thought about the small silver ring I always wore, a gift from my grandmother. It was simple, but it always made me feel connected to her strength. What if I used my ring? I suggested. I can wear it every day and remind myself that I'm not alone. Emily's eyes lit up. That's perfect. And you could even create a mantra or a phrase to repeat when you feel afraid. The thought of having a tangible reminder of my strength gave me a sense of hope and determination. I'll do that, I promised, excitement bubbling within me. Every time I look at the ring, I'll remember to stand strong. As the day progressed, however, the unease began to creep back in. During art class, while we were sketching, I felt a sudden chill wash over me. My skin prickled with an inexplicable dread, and I glanced over my shoulder, scanning the room for any sign of the shadows. The laughter of my classmates felt distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. It was then that I noticed a dark shape lurking in the corner of the classroom. It was just a fleeting glimpse, but it sent a shiver down my spine. My heart raced as I turned back to my sketch, trying to focus, but the shadows pressed in closer. I could feel their frustration, their anger simmering just beneath the surface. The voice spoke in my mind, sharp and urgent. They are testing you. Do not show fear. I gripped my pencil tightly, breathing deeply to calm myself. I focused on the rhythm of the strokes, channeling my energy into the art, trying to ignore the darkness closing in around me. But the shadows were relentless, and soon they manifested into whispers, swirling around my thoughts, taunting me with memories of my past failures and insecurities. You're weak. You'll never escape us. We are your true self, the voices hissed, chilling my bones. No, I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. You're just a reflection. I won't let you control me. With each declaration, I felt the grip of the shadows lessen, but they were still there, waiting, watching. I forced myself to concentrate on my art, pouring all my emotions into the canvas. The colors swirled together, creating a chaotic blend that mirrored the turmoil inside me. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I gathered my things, trying to shake off the lingering chill as I left the classroom. But as I walked down the hallway, the shadows felt even closer, pressing against me like a dark cloud. That evening, I took a moment to sit in front of my mirror, the glass reflecting not just my physical form but the emotional battleground within. I thought of the ring, the mantra, and everything I had accomplished. You are not your fears, I told my reflection, willing myself to believe it. You are stronger than this. As I gazed into the mirror, I could almost see the shadows lurking just out of sight, their whispers still echoing in my mind. But I also saw the resolve in my own eyes, the promise to keep fighting. I would not back down. I would confront them, not just with words, but with every ounce of strength I had. And as I whispered my mantra, a wave of determination surged through me. I am strong. I am not alone. I will keep fighting. In that moment, I understood that the battle was not just against the shadows, but also against the doubts that had haunted me for so long. It was a fight for my own identity, my own courage, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, I woke with a sense of urgency buzzing in my veins. I had a plan, no more running, no more hiding. Today would be different. As I slipped on my favorite shirt and fastened the silver ring around my finger, I felt a surge of determination. This ring, a tangible connection to my grandmother, was now a symbol of my strength and resilience. I could almost hear her voice in my mind, encouraging me to face my fears head-on. At school, the air felt charged with tension as I navigated the hallways. My heart raced each time I caught a glimpse of movement in the periphery of my vision. I could feel the shadows lurking, their presence a constant reminder of the battle I faced. I focused on Emily, who greeted me with her usual bright smile as I joined her at our lunch table. "Hey, you look ready to take on the world today," she remarked, her cheerful demeanor lifting my spirits. "I am," I replied, the weight of my determination solidifying my voice. "I'm going to confront these shadows once and for all. I've got a plan." Her eyes widened, a mixture of concern and excitement playing across her face. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to use my ring and my mantra to face them," I explained, feeling emboldened. "I won't let them control me anymore." Emily nodded, her expression supportive. "That's awesome. Just remember, you're not alone. I'm here for you." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, and as we returned to class, the unease started to creep back in. The shadows felt heavier today, pressing against my chest with each passing moment. I could hear their whispers growing louder, echoing the doubts I had worked so hard to silence. But I steeled myself against them, repeating my mantra quietly under my breath. I am strong. I am not alone. The afternoon dragged on, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension in the room. As the final bell rang, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. Today was the day I would face the darkness. As I walked home, I felt the shadows begin to close in. The familiar sensation of being watched prickled at the back of my neck. I quickened my pace, heart pounding in my chest. The weird dread clung to me, but I refused to let it consume me. I reached my house, breathless, and stepped inside. "Okay," I murmured to myself, closing the door behind me. "Time to do this." I took a deep breath, grounding myself as I walked to my room. The air felt thick, charged with an electric energy that made my skin crawl. I could feel the shadows swirling around me, their whispers clawing at the edges of my mind. But I pushed forward, ready to confront them once and for all. Standing in front of my mirror, I locked eyes with my reflection. "This is it," I whispered, gripping the ring tightly. "I am not afraid." Suddenly, the shadows flickered at the edges of the mirror, swirling in a chaotic dance. The chilling voice emerged, deeper and more sinister than before. "You think you can stand against us? We have always been a part of you, Sarah." "I know that," I retorted, my voice steady. "But you do not control me. I am stronger than you." As I spoke, the shadows coiled closer, forming into indistinct shapes that rippled and pulsed with malice. I could see faces forming, twisted and dark, each one a manifestation of my deepest fears and insecurities. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I held my ground, focusing on the warmth of the ring against my skin. "Your fear is what gives us power," the voice hissed, echoing around me. "You can't escape yourself." "I'm not trying to escape," I replied fiercely, my heart racing. "I'm embracing who I am. I am not defined by you." With that declaration, I raised my hand, the ring gleaming in the dim light. I am strong. I am not alone. The words flowed from my lips, each syllable bolstering my resolve. The shadows writhed, the forms flickering violently as if disturbed by my declaration. You cannot defeat us, they screamed, a cacophony of voices rising in rage. You will always be afraid. But with every repetition of my mantra, I felt their grip weaken. The room filled with a bright, blinding light, the shadows swirling frantically against the illumination. I closed my eyes, focusing on the warmth spreading through me, drawing out the darkness. I felt empowered, buoyed by the strength I had unearthed within myself. Your fear does not define me, I shouted, my voice ringing clear and unwavering. I choose courage. In that moment, the shadows surged forward, attempting to envelop me, but I stood firm, radiating light and strength. The warmth pulsed through my body, and I could feel the power of my determination rising like a tide. As I opened my eyes, I saw the shadows begin to dissolve, their forms dissipating into wisps of darkness that faded into the air. No, they shrieked, their voices disintegrating into the ether. You can't do this. You belong to us. But I was stronger. I took a step forward, releasing all the fear and doubt that had clung to me for so long. I will never belong to you, I cried, feeling the last remnants of their power dissipate into nothingness. The room grew quiet, the air thick with silence. I stood there, trembling but resolute, the last echoes of their voices fading into the distance. I felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. In the aftermath, I gazed into the mirror, and for the first time, I saw not a reflection of fear, but a face of determination and strength. I had confronted the darkness that had haunted me for so long and emerged victorious. But I knew the battle was not entirely over, the shadows could return. Yet, armed with my ring and my newfound courage, I felt prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I am strong, I whispered to myself, feeling the power of my words resonate in the stillness. And I will not be afraid. The days following my confrontation with the shadows were surreal. Each morning, I would wake up with a sense of hope, the sunlight spilling into my room like a warm embrace. I felt invincible, as though I had crossed a threshold into a new chapter of my life. I wore my ring every day, and each time I caught a glimpse of it, I was reminded of my strength and resilience. I had faced my fears and emerged on the other side, a warrior in my own right. School was different, too. The atmosphere felt lighter. I engaged more with my classmates, laughing and joking in ways I hadn't allowed myself to do before. Emily and I grew closer, sharing secrets and dreams, as though the bond we had forged in the wake of my fears had transformed into an unbreakable friendship. We often walked home together, talking about everything from our favorite books to our future aspirations. Yet, despite the brightness surrounding me, I could not shake the feeling that the shadows were still lurking, just beyond the periphery of my awareness. Occasionally, I would catch a fleeting movement out of the corner of my eye, or hear a faint whisper while I was alone, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I had faced them once, and I would do it again if necessary. One afternoon, after school, I decided to take a walk in the nearby park. It was a crisp autumn day, the leaves painted in hues of orange and gold, and the air smelled of earth and renewal. I felt an overwhelming desire to be in nature, away from the confines of my home and the remnants of darkness that still haunted my thoughts. As I strolled along the path, I took in the vibrant scenery, the trees swaying gently, the sun casting dappled shadows on the ground. It was beautiful, and I felt a deep connection to the world around me. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the fresh air, allowing the tranquility to wash over me. But the peace was short-lived. As I opened my eyes and resumed my walk, I noticed a figure standing a short distance away, half hidden behind a large oak tree. My heart skipped a beat. The figure was cloaked in shadow, the edges of its form blending into the darkness of the trunk behind it. I could not make out any features, but I felt a chill wash over me as an instinctual fear gripped my chest. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my ears. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky but determined. "Who's there?" The figure did not move, remaining still and silent. My breath caught in my throat, and I fought against a rising panic. I was no longer the scared girl from before. I had faced the shadows and won. I took a step forward, squaring my shoulders. "I'm not afraid of you." To my surprise, the figure shifted slightly, and I could see a hint of a smile, a warm, inviting expression that seemed at odds with the darkness surrounding it. "You should be," it replied, its voice smooth and melodic, yet laced with an unsettling undertone. A shiver ran down my spine. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am what you fear the most," the figure responded cryptically, stepping closer, still cloaked in shadow. "I am the embodiment of your insecurities and your doubts, the part of you that believes you are not enough." I recoiled, recognizing the familiar pattern. This was no ordinary figure. It was another manifestation of the darkness I had faced before. "You don't own me anymore," I shouted, anger boiling within me. "I've confronted the shadows and defeated them." The figure chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills through me. "Oh, but have you really? Just because you have pushed one layer away does not mean I am gone. I am always here, lurking in the depths of your mind, waiting for the moment you let your guard down." The shadows around it writhed, growing thicker as they reached out toward me, swirling with menace. I felt the familiar panic rising, but I pushed it down, recalling my mantra, the words that had once fueled my courage. "I am strong. I am not alone," I repeated, feeling the warmth of my ring against my skin. The figure faltered for a moment, the shadows retreating slightly, as if momentarily weakened by my resolve. "You may be strong now, but strength is fleeting. What happens when you are alone? When the world grows heavy and your doubts resurface? I will be here, waiting. I won't let you take control." I shouted, my voice echoing through the park. "You're just a part of me, and I am stronger than you." With that declaration, I felt a surge of energy, the light within me igniting like a beacon. The shadows recoiled, and I pressed forward, refusing to let fear dictate my actions. "You don't scare me anymore," I cried, channeling all my anger and determination into the words. But the figure only smiled, a predatory grin that made my skin crawl. "You think you can banish me? I am a part of you, and as long as you exist, I will exist too. You cannot escape your darkness, Sarah." As the shadows intensified around the figure, a realization hit me. This was not just a battle of strength, it was a test of acceptance. I had to confront not just the shadows outside, but the ones within myself, the insecurities I had buried deep. "I don't have to fear you," I said, my voice steadying. "You are a part of my past, but you do not define my future." The shadows recoiled once more, flickering uncertainly. "You think you are free, but you are still afraid," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed in my mind. I took a deep breath, allowing the light of my determination to swell within me. "I am free because I choose to face my fears. You will not control me. I am stronger than my doubts, and I will keep fighting." With those words, I stepped closer to the figure, ready to confront this darker part of myself head on. I acknowledge you, but you will not overpower me. I choose to embrace my strength, my imperfections, and my journey. As I spoke, the shadows began to dissipate, and I could feel the figure's power waning. You can't escape me forever, it cried, but the edge of desperation in its voice revealed its weakening hold on me. No, I replied, the warmth of my resolve burning bright. I won't escape. I will confront you, accept you, and then let you go. With one final, powerful declaration, I lifted my ring and shouted, I am strong. I am not alone. The light within me burst forth, enveloping the darkness in a radiant glow. The shadows writhed and twisted, their forms disintegrating into nothingness, until finally the figure collapsed, leaving behind only a faint echo of its voice. Remember, I will always be here. But as the echo faded, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had faced the shadows once more and emerged victorious, not through rejection, but through acceptance. With a deep breath, I stepped away from the empty space where the figure had stood, my heart pounding with exhilaration. I knew now that the journey was not over. There would always be battles to fight within myself. But I felt empowered, ready to embrace every part of my story, the light and the dark. As I walked home, the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange. I realized that the shadows may always be a part of my life, but they no longer held power over me. I was strong. I was not alone. And with that knowledge, I could face whatever came next. The walk home felt like a rebirth. Each step resonated with a newfound sense of purpose, the air tinged with the sweetness of victory. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the pavement, reminding me of the encounter I had just survived. I reveled in the warmth of the fading sunlight, feeling it infuse me with energy. I had faced the shadows, confronted my fears, and emerged stronger, but a small voice in the back of my mind whispered caution. As I turned the corner onto my street, I felt an unshakable sense of unease creeping back in. It was subtle at first, like a distant murmur, but as I approached my house, it grew louder, more insistent. I shook my head, determined not to let fear take root again. I had faced the darkness and had the strength to keep moving forward. I had to believe that. I entered my house, the familiar scent of home wrapping around me like a blanket. Mom, I'm home. I called out, but only silence answered. My heart sank. She was supposed to be home from work by now. It wasn't unusual for her to run late, but the quiet seemed to amplify my lingering anxiety. With a quick glance at the clock, I noted that it was already past 6. I made my way to the kitchen, the clatter of my shoes echoing in the stillness. I opened the fridge, hoping for a snack to distract me, but as I rummaged through the shelves, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I reached for a carton of orange juice, but stopped short when I noticed the light flickering in the living room. My heart raced as I moved toward the source of the flickering. The television was on, casting a dim glow over the room, but the screen was filled with static. I frowned, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Mom? I called out again, louder this time. Are you here? Silence lingered, wrapping around me like a thick fog. I stepped into the living room, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. The static noise buzzed in the air, an eerie reminder of the shadows I had just banished. I reached for the remote and turned off the TV, the abrupt silence amplifying my unease. I sat down on the couch, trying to calm my racing heart. Perhaps I was overreacting. Maybe my mom had just gone to the store, or she was caught up in something important. I pulled out my phone to check for any messages, but the screen remained blank. Great, I muttered, frustration bubbling within me. Suddenly, a creaking noise echoed from the hallway, making me jump. I looked up, my pulse quickening. "Mom?" I called out, but only silence responded. I stood up, hesitant, and walked toward the hallway, each step heavy with apprehension. As I approached the end of the corridor, I heard another noise, a soft whisper, like a gentle breeze passing through the cracks of the house. My heart pounded as I strained to listen, hoping to discern the source of the sound. "Mom?" I tried again, my voice trembling. The whispering grew louder, swirling around me like an invisible fog. It felt familiar, echoing the voices I had encountered during my battles with the shadows. My skin prickled as a chill crept into the air, a sensation that ignited my instincts. I stepped back, uncertain whether to advance or retreat. The shadows I had faced before felt like distant memories, but now they seemed to converge around me again. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I won't let you control me." I raised my ring, feeling its cool metal against my skin, reminding me of my strength. "Sarah," the whisper called, a soft, haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. It sounded like my mother's voice, but something felt off, twisted, wrong. "Help me, Mom," I shouted, panic clawing at my throat. I rushed toward the source of the voice, driven by fear and the desperate need to find her. The hallway stretched out before me, the shadows lengthening as I moved deeper into the darkness. As I reached my mother's bedroom door, I paused, my hand hovering over the knob. The whispering intensified, wrapping around me like a shroud. "Help me, Sarah," it echoed, and I felt a tug at my heart. I turned the knob and pushed the door open, the hinges creaking ominously. The room was dim, shadows clinging to the corners, and the air felt thick and heavy. My heart raced as I stepped inside, the whispering growing louder, swirling in an unsettling chorus. "Mom?" I called again, my voice trembling. The room was empty, the bed neatly made, but my mother was nowhere to be found. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as dread settled in my stomach. Where could she be? Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls. I felt the presence of something lurking just beyond my sight, a sensation that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Mom!" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "Where are you?" Just then, the whispering coalesced into a single, piercing voice that sent chills down my spine. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah." I spun around, scanning the room for the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows in the corners seemed to grow darker, thicker, and I could feel their presence pressing in around me, suffocating in their intensity. "No!" I cried, my voice rising in panic. "You're not real. I won't let you take me again." I felt the power of my ring surge within me, a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness. The voice laughed, low and mocking. "You think you've escaped me? I will always be here. And now, you will witness what happens when you defy your true self." As the laughter echoed through the room, I felt an icy grip around my heart. I couldn't back down now. I had faced the shadows before, and I wouldn't let them take me or my mother again. "I am stronger than you," I shouted, raising my hand, the ring glimmering brightly. "I am not afraid." With that declaration, I summoned every ounce of courage within me. I focused on the warmth radiating from the ring, allowing it to push back against the shadows that threatened to envelop me. "You have no power over me," I cried, the light brightening, pushing back the darkness inch by inch. The shadows shrieked in rage, swirling and twisting as I stood my ground. I could feel the energy building within me, my mantra echoing in my mind. "I am strong. I am not alone." With a final surge of determination, I released the light, allowing it to burst forth and flood the room. The shadows writhed and screamed, their forms dissolving in the brilliance of my strength. For a moment, I felt invincible, as though nothing could stand against me. But just as quickly, the light flickered, and the shadows recoiled, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness at the far end of the room. "You may have banished the darkness, but you will never escape your fears," it hissed, its voice twisted and echoing with malice. I felt a chill settle deep in my bones as I faced this new threat. It was as if every fear I had ever harbored had coalesced into this single entity, and it was more powerful than anything I had encountered before. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. I had faced the shadows before, and I would do it again. This time, I would not just fight to survive. I would fight for my mother, for my home, for the life I wanted to reclaim. "Bring it on," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling around me. I felt the strength of my ring pulse against my skin, a reminder of the light within me that could conquer even the darkest fears. As the figure stepped closer, the room seemed to darken, shadows flickering like flames. I stood my ground, ready to face whatever came next. I had already faced the darkness within. Now, I would face it again, and I would not back down. The figure loomed before me, its dark silhouette pulsating with an unsettling energy that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. My heart raced as I stood there, rooted to the spot, staring into the abyss of my fears. The air felt heavy, laden with an oppressive weight that constricted my chest. This was not just a battle of shadows. It was a confrontation with the very essence of my insecurities, the part of me that had always doubted my strength. "Do you really think you can defeat me?" the figure taunted, its voice a chilling whisper that seemed to echo from every corner of the room. "I am everything you fear. I am your doubts, your failures, the moments you wish you could take back. You can't fight me, Sarah. I am a part of you. I won't let you define me," I shouted, summoning the courage that had carried me through so many battles before. I could feel the warmth of my ring pulsing against my skin, a beacon of hope in the darkness. I am stronger than my fears. I have faced the shadows, and I will not back down now. With that declaration, I focused on the light within me, allowing it to swell and illuminate the room. The darkness recoiled slightly, the figure faltering as my strength surged forward. I could see flickers of uncertainty dance across its form, the shadows momentarily dissipating in the brightness. "Strength is fleeting," the figure hissed, recovering quickly, its voice now a low growl. "You will fall back into despair. Everyone does. Just like your mother." The mention of my mother sent a jolt of pain through my heart. "What do you know about my mother?" I demanded, anger igniting within me. "You don't know anything about me." "Oh, but I do," it replied, a cruel smirk twisting its features. "You think you're protecting her? But she's the reason you're here, trapped in this cycle of fear and darkness. What if she never comes back? What if you lose her forever?" The weight of its words crashed over me like a wave, dragging me down into a whirlpool of doubt. Memories of times when I felt helpless surged to the surface, times when my mother had to comfort me during nightmares, when she had stayed up late to help me with school projects, times when I felt inadequate and the burden of my fears threatened to drown me. No, I shouted, shaking my head fiercely. You won't win. I know who I am, and I know my worth. My mother raised me to be strong, to stand up to the darkness. As the words left my mouth, a warmth spread through my chest, the kind that reminded me of the countless moments of love and support from my mother. I thought of her laughter, her unwavering belief in me, even when I doubted myself. I clutched my ring tighter, feeling its energy flow through me. You think love can save you? The figure scoffed, the shadows swirling dangerously. Love is a weakness. It makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is a gateway to despair. I disagree. I shouted back, my voice unwavering. Love is my strength. It's what keeps me fighting. I know I am not alone in this. In that moment, I gathered all the love I felt for my mother and for the friends who stood by me, all the connections that fortified my spirit. I drew upon that energy, allowing it to manifest into light, bright and powerful. The shadows screamed in protest as I released it, illuminating every corner of the room with a blinding radiance. Enough, the figure shrieked, its form flickering as the light pressed against it. You think you can banish me? I will always return. I will face you again and again until you understand, I declared, feeling my heart swell with conviction. You do not define me. You are nothing but a shadow, temporary and insubstantial. I will not be afraid. As I spoke, the shadows writhed, contorting and pulling away from the brilliance of my light. I could see the fear etched into the figure's face, the darkness around it dissipating like smoke in the wind. With every breath, I pushed the light forward, forcing the shadows back, determined to reclaim my space. The figure stumbled back, its laughter turning to howls of rage. You are naive, child. You cannot escape me. I will always find a way back into your life. I didn't respond. Instead, I concentrated on the warmth surging from my ring, envisioning it as a shield against the encroaching darkness. I pictured my mother's face, her smile lighting up the darkest days, and I felt an overwhelming surge of hope. Go away, I cried, pushing the light forward with all my might. You are no match for my determination. With that, I unleashed a burst of light so powerful it illuminated every corner of the room, banishing the shadows entirely. The figure shrieked, its form breaking apart into wisps of darkness that evaporated into the air, leaving nothing behind but silence. I stood there, panting, the remnants of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The shadows had been vanquished, but a nagging fear still lingered in my heart. Had I truly defeated them, or would they return? But as I looked around the now brightly lit room, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had faced the darkness within, confronted my fears, and emerged victorious. The presence that had haunted me was gone, at least for now. Suddenly, the sound of a key turning in the lock pulled me from my thoughts. My heart raced as the front door creaked open, and my mother stepped inside, her face pale and tired but instantly filled with relief upon seeing me. Sarah, she exclaimed, rushing toward me. I was so worried. I got caught up at work and lost track of time. Mom. I threw my arms around her, clinging to her tightly. I thought something happened to you. I was so scared. Oh, sweetheart, she soothed, holding me close. I'm fine, just a little late. I'm sorry to worry you. I pulled back, looking into her eyes, the warmth and love I saw there grounding me. I faced something really dark. I thought I might lose you too. Her expression softened as she stroked my hair. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. You've always been. Whatever it is, we can face it together. I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of strength. The shadows may return, and I knew that the battle within would continue, but I would no longer face it alone. Together, we would confront whatever darkness lay ahead, and I would not falter. As we settled down for dinner, the lingering echoes of the battle faded into the background, replaced by the comforting sounds of our home. I glanced down at my ring, its light still glowing softly. It was a reminder of the courage I had found within myself, a beacon of hope in the darkness. I was ready to face whatever came next, not just for myself, but for the ones I loved. Together, we would light the way through any shadows that dared to creep back into our lives. And with that thought, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that the future, though uncertain, would be bright. Dinner passed in a haze of warmth and laughter, the comforting rhythm of everyday life slowly easing the tension that had built up throughout the day. My mother chatted about her day at work, the latest projects her team was tackling, and the small victories that came with them. Her voice was a soothing balm, wrapping around me and chasing away the shadows that had threatened to engulf us both. As I helped clear the table, a sense of normalcy returned, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was grateful for this moment. The mundane task of washing dishes became a ritual, a way to reconnect with my mother and put the darker events behind us, at least for now. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked, her brow furrowing as she noticed the distant look in my eyes. "You seemed a little out of it earlier." I paused, dishcloth in hand, considering her question. "Yeah, I just had a weird day. But I faced some fears. I'm okay now." I offered her a reassuring smile, even though I felt the remnants of the encounter still lingering in the corners of my mind. My mother nodded, her expression understanding but concerned. "You know you can always talk to me, right? About anything?" "I know, Mom." "Thank you," I replied, swallowing down the urge to reveal everything. Part of me wanted to share the details, the dark figure, the whispers, the battle. But another part of me hesitated, reluctant to burden her with my fears when she had just returned from a long day. I wanted to protect her, to keep the shadows at bay, if only for a little while longer. After dinner, I retreated to my room, the familiar surroundings providing comfort. I sat on my bed, the room dimly lit by the bedside lamp. The walls were adorned with posters of my favorite bands, a reminder of who I was before the darkness crept in. I glanced at the small mirror on my desk, my reflection staring back at me. The person looking back was still me, but I felt different, changed. I had faced something that had pushed me to my limits and had emerged stronger, yet the memory of that encounter remained vivid in my mind. I reached for my ring, feeling its cool metal against my skin, a tangible reminder of my strength. As I sat there, lost in thought, the shadows from earlier began to seep back into my consciousness, creeping into my mind like tendrils of smoke. I closed my eyes, willing them to retreat, but they persisted, whispering doubts that echoed from the depths of my insecurities. What if it comes back? I thought, panic rising in my chest. What if I can't fight it again? Taking a deep breath, I opened my eyes and shook my head, dispelling the intrusive thoughts. "I won't let fear control me," I murmured to myself, echoing the mantra I had held onto during my battle. I have faced it once, and I can do it again. I grabbed my journal from the nightstand, a blank canvas for my thoughts and fears. Writing had always been a release for me, a way to untangle the knots in my mind. I opened to a fresh page and began to pour my feelings onto the paper, recounting the events of the day, the whispers, the figure, the strength I had found. The pen moved quickly, capturing every detail as I recounted my confrontation with the darkness. The act of writing was cathartic, each word allowing me to reclaim a piece of myself. By the time I finished, I felt lighter, as if I had exorcised some of the shadows lingering in my mind. After a while, I set the journal aside and lay back on my bed, staring up at the ceiling. The familiar creaks of the house surrounded me, a comforting reminder that I was home. But even as I closed my eyes, sleep eluded me, my mind racing with thoughts of what might come next. I found myself tossing and turning, the darkness of the room closing in around me, wrapping me in an uncomfortable embrace. Just as I began to drift off, I was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway. My heart raced as I listened, straining to hear over the quiet thrum of my pulse. "Mom?" I whispered, but no response came. The footsteps continued, soft but deliberate, leading towards my room. A chill ran down my spine, and I sat up, my heart pounding. Was it just my imagination? Or was there really something, or someone, out there? I reached for my phone on the nightstand, turning on the flashlight and illuminating the dark corners of my room. The beam danced across the walls, casting long shadows, but nothing seemed out of place. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. It was probably just the house settling, or maybe my mom had gotten up to get a glass of water. But as I lay back down, the footsteps echoed again, this time closer, more pronounced. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I held my breath, straining to listen. The sounds were unmistakable, coming from the hallway, right outside my door. "Mom?" I called again, my voice trembling slightly. There was still no answer, only the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. My instincts told me to get up, to check, but another part of me wanted to hide under the covers, hoping that whatever it was would simply go away. Summoning my courage, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up. The wooden floor felt cool beneath my feet as I moved toward the door, each step echoing in the stillness. I reached for the doorknob, my heart racing with each passing moment, and slowly turned it. The door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit hallway. I stepped out cautiously, the light from my phone cutting through the darkness. The house was eerily quiet, but I could feel a presence lingering in the air, thick and foreboding. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the hallway. I peered into the shadows, half expecting the dark figure to emerge once more. But nothing moved. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. As I stepped further into the hallway, the footsteps stopped abruptly. I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of dread creeping in. "Mom?" I called again, a little louder this time. "Are you there?" Just then, I heard a soft whisper, low and haunting, "Help me, Sarah." My blood ran cold. The voice was unmistakable, and it sent chills coursing through my body. I took a hesitant step back, the air thickening around me, suffocating in its intensity. The shadows seemed to close in again, swirling and shifting in the corners of my vision. "No!" I shouted, clenching my fists. "You're not real. I faced you before." But the whisper continued, growing louder and more insistent. "Help me. I'm lost." The darkness enveloped me, and I felt a wave of despair crashing over me. I fought against it, recalling the strength I had found earlier. I thought of my mother, of the love we shared, of the battles I had fought. I couldn't let the shadows take hold again. With a surge of determination, I raised my phone, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. "You will not take me," I declared, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. In response, the shadows recoiled, the whispering fading into a low hiss. "You can't escape me forever, Sarah. I will always find a way back. I'm not afraid of you." I shouted back, my resolve hardening. "You are just a shadow. You cannot define who I am." As I spoke those words, I felt the warmth of my ring pulse at my side, a reminder of the power I had within me. With that, I summoned the light again, allowing it to radiate from me like a shield, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The shadows writhed in protest, and for a brief moment, the hallway was illuminated, revealing nothing but empty space. The whispering ceased, replaced by a profound silence that echoed through the air. I stood my ground, heart racing, determined to face whatever came next. In that moment of stillness, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was not alone. I had faced my fears and emerged victorious. No matter how many times the shadows returned, I would stand and fight, drawing strength from the love around me. I turned back toward my room, the light from my phone flickering as I walked away from the darkness. I could feel the weight of the encounter lifting, the shadows retreating as I embraced the light within me. As I closed my bedroom door behind me, I took a deep breath, feeling the safety of my space envelop me once more. I sat back down on my bed, the warmth of the covers beckoning me to rest. With my journal in hand, I began to write again, capturing the intensity of the encounter and the strength I had found. I filled the pages with my thoughts, recounting my battles, the fear, and the power of love that had guided me through the darkness. And as I wrote, I felt a renewed sense of purpose swelling within me. I would face the shadows again, and I would continue to fight, knowing that I was not alone. I had the strength to confront my fears, and with each battle, I would grow stronger. As the night deepened, I finally felt the pull of sleep wrap around me, a gentle embrace that coaxed me into its depths. My last thought before I drifted off was of my mother, her love shining like a beacon in the darkness. No matter how many battles lay ahead, I knew I could face them with her by my side. And with that thought, I surrendered to the embrace of sleep, ready to rise again when the dawn broke. The next morning arrived with the soft glow of sunlight filtering through my curtains, spilling warm light across the room. I blinked awake, the remnants of last night's encounter still fresh in my mind. It took a moment to shake off the heaviness of the shadows, but as I stretched and sat up, the warmth of the sun wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. The reassuring sounds of my mother bustling in the kitchen drifted through the hallway, her cheerful humming echoing in the air. I could smell the familiar aroma of pancakes cooking, the sweet scent mingling with the crispness of the morning. I smiled, grateful for the simple pleasures of breakfast and the comfort of home. After a quick shower, I dressed in my favorite hoodie and jeans, the soft fabric comforting against my skin. I took a moment to glance in the mirror, adjusting the small ring on my finger that had become a symbol of my strength. It sparkled in the morning light, reminding me of the battle I had fought. The dark figure from the night before felt like a distant memory, and I hoped that I could keep it that way. I made my way to the kitchen, the sounds of my mother's cheerful voice greeting me. "Good morning, sleepyhead." I was just about to send a search party, she teased, her eyes sparkling as she turned to me, flipping a pancake with the ease of someone who had mastered the art over years. "Sorry. I guess I needed the sleep," I replied, taking a seat at the table. I could see the steam rising from the stack of pancakes, golden and fluffy, and my stomach grumbled in response. As I dug into my breakfast, we chatted about our plans for the day. My mother mentioned a trip to the grocery store and some chores around the house, but all I could think about was the lingering unease from last night. I tried to push it aside, focusing instead on the laughter and lightness of our conversation. But even as I smiled and engaged with her, I felt the shadows at the edge of my mind whispering doubts and fears. What if the darkness returned? What if I couldn't protect my mother? After breakfast, I decided to go for a walk. The fresh air always helped clear my head, and I needed to shake off the residual tension. As I stepped outside, the sun bathed the world in light, and the cool breeze brushed against my skin, invigorating and refreshing. I walked through the neighborhood, my feet carrying me toward the park, a familiar sanctuary that had seen countless moments of joy. The park was filled with the sounds of laughter, children playing, and the rustle of leaves in the wind. I found a bench beneath a large oak tree, its branches reaching out like protective arms. Sitting there, I took a deep breath, allowing the calmness of the scene to seep into my bones. But just as I began to relax, I noticed a figure in the distance, standing alone by the edge of the playground. A chill ran down my spine. The silhouette was familiar, almost haunting. It was a boy from my school, someone I had seen in passing but didn't know well. His eyes were downcast, and he seemed lost in thought, a stark contrast to the vibrant energy around him. I debated whether to approach him. The shadows from last night flickered at the edges of my mind, urging caution. But I reminded myself of my determination to confront fear, to push through the discomfort. Gathering my courage, I stood up and made my way toward him. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked as I approached. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face, followed by a hint of recognition. "Oh, hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "I'm fine, just thinking." I could see the sadness in his eyes, a shadow that mirrored my own struggles. "I get that," I replied softly, trying to convey understanding. "Sometimes it helps to talk about it." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess. It's just, things have been tough lately. I feel like I'm in a dark place." The words struck a chord deep within me. "I understand," I said, feeling an instant connection. "I've been there too. Sometimes it feels like there's no way out." He looked at me, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Really? What do you do to get through it?" I paused, thinking of my own battles, the shadows that had threatened to consume me. I try to find moments of light, even in the darkness. Like talking to someone, writing, or just taking a walk. It's okay to feel lost sometimes, but you have to keep looking for hope. His expression softened as he absorbed my words. "I think I needed to hear that," he admitted, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I've been so overwhelmed. It's hard to see the way forward." "Just take it one step at a time," I encouraged, feeling a sense of purpose in sharing my experience. "You're not alone in this. We all have our struggles, and talking about it helps." For the first time, a small smile broke through his somber expression. "Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm going to try to focus on the good things." As we chatted, I realized that this connection was a reminder of the strength we could find in one another. Sharing our burdens lightened the load, and for a moment, I felt the shadows recede. I offered him my number, and we exchanged a few laughs, the tension between us fading as we spoke. When I finally headed home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Helping him had not only lifted his spirits, but had reminded me of my own strength. Perhaps there was a way to push back against the shadows, to find light even in the darkest of times. Later that evening, as I prepared for bed, I found myself reflecting on the day's events. My journal lay open on my desk, the pages filled with my thoughts and experiences. I picked up my pen and began to write again, capturing the connection I had forged with the boy and the hope that had emerged from our conversation. But as I wrote, a familiar unease began to settle over me. The shadows whispered at the edges of my mind, taunting me with reminders of my fears. I could almost feel their presence lurking just out of sight, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. I closed the journal, feeling the weight of the day pressing against my chest. "I will not let you control me," I said aloud, summoning my courage. "You are just shadows, and I am stronger than you." With that declaration, I took a deep breath and settled into bed, the familiar covers wrapping around me. The darkness of the room felt less oppressive now, as if my words had pushed back against the encroaching shadows. I closed my eyes, allowing sleep to take me, determined to face whatever came next. But as I drifted off, the shadows began to whisper once more, their voices soft and insidious, winding their way through my dreams. "You cannot escape us, Sarah," they hissed, their tones filled with mockery. "We are always here, waiting for you to falter." I clenched my fists, trying to hold onto the light I had found. But the darkness grew stronger, and I felt myself being pulled deeper into its depths, the whispering voices growing louder, filling my mind with doubt. "You will never be free." And with that, I was plunged into a world of nightmares, where the shadows danced just beyond my reach, taunting me with their promises of despair. I fought against their pull, yearning for the light, but the darkness tightened its grip, dragging me deeper into the void. Little did I know that the true test of my strength was yet to come, and the shadows that haunted my dreams would soon manifest into something far more terrifying than I had ever faced before. I awoke in a cold sweat, the echoes of those whispering shadows still swirling in my mind. The remnants of my nightmare clung to me like a heavy fog, and I sat up in bed, struggling to shake off the feeling of dread. My heart raced as I glanced around my dimly lit room, the familiar surroundings now tainted by the darkness I had confronted in my dreams. The pale light of dawn filtered through my curtains, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and curl like fingers reaching toward me. I pushed my hair back from my face and took a deep breath, forcing myself to ground in reality. I had faced the darkness before, and I could do it again. But this time, the stakes felt higher, the shadows more insistent. I slipped out of bed, the chill of the wooden floor sending shivers up my spine. My feet moved on autopilot as I made my way to the bathroom. As I splashed cold water on my face, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were wide, the bags beneath them testament to my restless night. I felt like a ghost of myself, lingering on the edge of my own life. I brushed my teeth, trying to dispel the lingering fear that gnawed at my insides. I thought of the boy from the park, the way his smile had pierced the gloom, even if only for a moment. It was a reminder that connection could be a beacon, even in the darkest of times. I needed to hold on to that light, to find strength in the shared struggles of others. As I got dressed, I resolved to confront my fears head-on. I would reach out to the boy again, perhaps invite him to the park where we had talked. Maybe together we could illuminate the shadows that threatened to consume us both. With this newfound determination, I felt a flicker of hope begin to kindle within me. After breakfast, I grabbed my phone and shot him a text. "Hey, it was great talking yesterday. Want to meet at the park again today?" I hesitated for a moment, biting my lip, unsure if I should mention how I was feeling. But I decided to keep it simple. I needed this connection. It might help both of us. I paced around the house, the minutes stretching into what felt like an eternity. Anxiety twisted in my stomach as I waited for his reply. Would he even want to meet again? What if he didn't respond? Just as I was about to lose hope, my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Sure." I'd like that. What time? A wave of relief washed over me. I quickly replied, suggesting a time and place. As I hit send, I felt a rush of excitement mixed with nervous anticipation. This was the first step toward reclaiming my life from the shadows that had loomed over me. When the time came, I walked to the park, the sun shining brightly, illuminating the path ahead. The world felt alive, and with every step, I pushed away the lingering doubts. I arrived early and settled onto our usual bench, the oak tree casting a protective shadow overhead. I took a moment to breathe, letting the warmth of the sun envelop me. When I saw him approach, my heart raced. He looked more relaxed today, a hint of a smile on his face as he waved. "Hey, thanks for inviting me," he said, taking a seat beside me. "Of course. I thought it might be nice to talk again," I replied, returning his smile. We started off chatting about mundane topics, school, classes, the weather. But as the conversation flowed, I could sense the deeper issues lingering beneath the surface. I leaned in closer, my voice softening. "You know, if you ever want to talk about what's bothering you, I'm here." He hesitated, his eyes drifting away, as if contemplating whether to share his struggles. "It's just, things at home have been hard," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "My parents are always fighting, and it feels like everything is falling apart. I don't know how to handle it." My heart ached for him. "I'm really sorry. That sounds tough." "I can relate to feeling overwhelmed," I said, my own struggles surfacing. "It's like the weight of everything presses down on you, and you can't breathe." He nodded, understanding etched on his face. "Yeah, exactly. Some days, it feels like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop, you know?" As we continued to talk, I felt the shadows of my own fears creeping back in, but they felt different now. Instead of suffocating me, they lingered like a distant storm on the horizon, present but not overwhelming. I realized that by sharing my fears, I was finding a way to push back against them. Our conversation flowed seamlessly, laughter punctuating the moments of vulnerability. For the first time in days, I felt lighter. We exchanged stories, and in doing so, I could sense the healing power of our connection. But just as I began to feel comfortable, a chill raced through the air. The sun dipped behind a cloud, casting an ominous shadow across the park. I glanced around, unease curling in my stomach. The shadows seemed to pulse around us, dark tendrils creeping closer as if drawn to our light. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the air grew heavy, thick with a sense of foreboding. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Yeah, just. I think I need a moment," I replied, trying to gather my thoughts. As I stood up, the feeling intensified, as though the very ground beneath my feet was shifting. I glanced around, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something lurking in the distance, a shadowy figure moving just beyond the trees. My breath quickened as panic flared inside me. "Do you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. He followed my gaze, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion. "See what?" "It's right there," I insisted, pointing toward the trees where I had glimpsed the figure. But when he looked again, there was nothing but the rustling leaves, the park returning to its serene state. "Maybe you're just tired," he suggested gently, but his tone betrayed a hint of concern. "Yeah, maybe," I mumbled, forcing a smile. Yet deep down, I felt the shadows coiling tighter around me, whispering their dark promises. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had haunted my dreams was now lurking in reality, waiting for the right moment to strike. With a heavy heart, I knew I had to confront this darkness once and for all. But I would not face it alone. I looked at the boy beside me, grateful for his presence. "I think we need to stick together," I said, my voice firm. "Whatever this is, I can't face it by myself." His eyes widened slightly, and he nodded. "Yeah, I'm with you. We'll figure this out together." Little did we know that our bond would be tested in ways we could never have imagined as the shadows began to close in, waiting for the moment to reveal their true form. The tension in the air was palpable as I and the boy sat on the park bench, the shadows stretching around us like a shroud. I could feel the oppressive weight of darkness creeping in, whispering doubts and fears that tugged at the edges of my mind. The laughter and chatter of children playing nearby felt distant and muted, as if the world had faded away, leaving us alone in a vast, echoing void. "Let's take a walk," I suggested, meaning to put some distance between us and the dark energy that seemed to linger. I stood, my legs feeling slightly shaky beneath me, and he quickly followed suit. As we walked along the gravel path that wound through the park, the crunching of the stones beneath our feet seemed to break the spell of silence that had settled around us. "So, what do you like to do for fun?" he asked, attempting to lighten the mood. The question was simple, but it felt heavy in my heart. I was grateful for his effort to shift the atmosphere, even if just a little. "I used to love drawing," I replied, memories flooding back of countless afternoons spent with a sketchbook in hand. "But lately, I've been too distracted to focus on it." "Maybe you just need some inspiration," he said, his tone hopeful. "I know a great spot by the lake that's perfect for drawing. The scenery is amazing." "That sounds nice," I agreed, trying to picture the peaceful image he painted with his words. I desperately needed a break from the weight of reality, a chance to escape the looming shadows. "Let's go there." We made our way to the lake, the gentle sounds of water lapping against the shore creating a soothing backdrop. The sun broke free from the clouds, casting shimmering reflections across the surface of the water. It was beautiful, almost magical. I felt a sense of calm wash over me as I approached the water's edge, watching the ripples distort the reflections of the trees and sky. As we settled down on a grassy patch near the lake, I took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh, crisp air. The beauty of the scene momentarily banished the darkness that had been clawing at me. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of nature wash over me like a balm. "Can I see some of your drawings?" he asked, breaking the serene silence. I hesitated, a mix of embarrassment and vulnerability swirling within me. "They're not very good," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't really done much lately." He encouraged me with a warm smile. "I'm sure they're great. You should share them." With a deep breath, I fished my sketchbook out of my backpack. It felt like unveiling a piece of my soul, a part of me I had kept hidden for too long. I opened it to a few pages filled with rough sketches, each one representing moments of joy, pain, and everything in between. As he leaned in to look, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. "This one is of my old treehouse," I explained, pointing to a sketch of the rickety structure nestled among the branches of a familiar tree. "And this one is a flower garden I used to visit." He studied each page carefully, a smile growing on his face. "These are amazing. You have a real talent," he said, his enthusiasm genuine. I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of validation I hadn't expected. "Thanks," I said, my confidence slowly rebuilding. "It means a lot coming from you." We talked for a while longer, exchanging thoughts about art, life, and everything in between. I could see the tension in his shoulders easing, and I found solace in our connection. For that brief moment, the shadows receded, leaving us in a bubble of warmth and understanding. But just as I began to feel at ease, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves overhead. A sudden chill swept through the air, sending a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a dark figure lurking among the trees on the other side of the lake. My heart dropped, and I froze, staring at the spot where I thought I'd seen it. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice pulling me back to the present. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the fear that tightened around my throat. "I thought I saw something," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "Like what?" he prompted, concern flickering in his eyes. "Just a shadow." "It's probably nothing," I said, attempting to brush it off, but the unease lingered in the pit of my stomach. "Let's go for a walk," he suggested, standing up. "Maybe it'll help clear your mind." I nodded, grateful for his company. As we strolled along the water's edge, I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. But the further we walked, the more it gnawed at me. I could almost feel the presence behind me, lurking just out of sight. "Do you ever get the feeling that you're being followed?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, brow furrowed. "Sometimes. It's a creepy feeling." "Why?" I keep sensing something in the shadows," I confessed, feeling foolish for admitting it. "It feels like it's watching us." He paused, looking thoughtful. "Maybe it's just your mind playing tricks on you. Or maybe you're still shaken from yesterday." "Yeah, maybe," I murmured, trying to convince myself. But deep down, I felt the darkness swirling around us, wrapping itself around our ankles like thick fog. As we continued walking, I tried to focus on the beauty of the lake, the ducks gliding across the water, the sunlight dancing on the surface. But every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, and my heart would race. "Let's sit down for a moment," he suggested, and I eagerly agreed, desperate for a break from the anxiety that had begun to settle heavily on my chest. We found a small bench overlooking the lake, and as we sat, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "I don't know why I'm feeling this way," I admitted. "It's like the shadows are everywhere, and I can't escape them." He looked at me with empathy, his gaze steady. "You're not alone in this. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay to talk about it. Sometimes it helps to share your fears." I nodded, grateful for his support. "I just don't want to drag you down with me," I confessed, guilt creeping in. "You have your own struggles to deal with." "Hey," he said, turning to face me fully. "We're in this together, remember? I want to help. You're not a burden." His words warmed me, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite. "Okay, I'll try. I just wish I could make the shadows go away. They might not disappear completely, but we can face them together," he replied, determination shining in his eyes. As we sat there, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the lake. I felt a surge of gratitude for this connection, for the way he understood without judgment. In that moment, I knew I had found a true friend, someone who could help me navigate the darkness. But just as I began to feel that sense of security, a low, eerie sound drifted through the air, cutting through the tranquility of the moment. It was a faint whisper, barely audible, yet unmistakably chilling. I glanced around, panic rising in my chest. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaky. He nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah, what was that?" The sound seemed to echo around us, growing louder and more insistent. "You cannot escape us," the voice reverberated through my mind, icy fingers of dread clawing at my spine. I stood up abruptly, heart racing. "We need to go. Now." "What's happening?" he asked, confusion etched on his face. "Just trust me," I urged, grabbing his wrist and pulling him toward the path. The shadows felt alive now, creeping closer, their whispers growing more frantic. I could sense their presence at our backs, relentless and hungry. As we sprinted away from the lake, I glanced over my shoulder, and the sight sent ice through my veins. The shadows coalesced into a dark, shifting form, indistinct yet palpable, chasing after us with a malevolent energy. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline propelling us forward. I could hear the whispers growing louder, a cacophony of voices echoing in my ears. "You cannot hide." We dashed down the path, the world around us blurring as we focused solely on escaping. I felt the panic rising within me, a primal urge to flee from the darkness that threatened to engulf us. My breath came in ragged gasps as we reached the park entrance, but I couldn't stop now. "We have to get to my house," I urged, glancing back one last time. The shadows seemed to pulse and writhe, growing bolder with each passing moment. With his hand firmly in mine, we raced down the street, my heart pounding in time with my footsteps. I focused on the distant glow of my house, a beacon of safety amidst the encroaching darkness. "Almost there," I called out, determination flooding my veins. But the shadows were relentless, a dark tide crashing against us, and I felt their cold breath at my back. As we reached my front door, I fumbled for the key, my fingers shaking. Come on," I urged, panic bubbling inside me. Finally, the door swung open, and we stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind us. I locked it with trembling hands, leaning against it as if it could keep the darkness at bay. "Are we safe?" he panted, eyes wide with fear. "For now," I replied, though I knew the shadows would not be easily deterred. As we caught our breath, I felt the adrenaline begin to ebb, replaced by a crushing sense of dread. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "I don't know, but it felt real," he said, his expression mirroring my fear. The reality of what we had just experienced hung heavily in the air, and I could feel the shadows lurking just beyond the door, waiting for the moment to strike again. I turned to him, determination sparking within me. "We have to figure this out together," I said, my voice steadying. He nodded, a glimmer of resolve igniting in his eyes. "Okay. We'll face it, whatever it is." Little did we know, this was only the beginning of our fight against the darkness. The shadows were not merely figments of our imagination, they were a force that sought to consume us, and we would need to find the strength within ourselves to confront the growing threat. In that moment, as the whispers echoed outside, I realized that our connection was our greatest weapon. Together, we would face the shadows and uncover the truth that lay hidden within the darkness. The battle had only just begun. The air inside my house felt thick with tension as I leaned against the door, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. I could still hear the faint whispers outside, a haunting echo that sent chills down my spine. I glanced over at my companion, whose wide eyes reflected my own terror. "Do you think it's gone?" he asked, glancing nervously at the door. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. It felt like it was right behind us. We both fell silent, listening intently as the whispers grew softer, but the ominous feeling remained. The shadows outside felt almost sentient, swirling just out of sight, waiting for the moment we would let our guard down. Let's find somewhere to hide, I suggested, a tremor in my voice. If it's still out there, we need to be prepared. We moved away from the door, eyes darting around the dimly lit living room as if the shadows were lurking within the corners. I led him to the back of the house, where my parents kept a storage room filled with old furniture, boxes, and forgotten memories. It seemed the safest option, a place where we could barricade ourselves away from whatever was outside. As we stepped into the storage room, I flicked on the light. The bulb flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dust motes danced in the air, and the scent of old wood and mildew filled my lungs. I quickly scanned the room for anything that could serve as a barricade. "Help me move this," I said, motioning toward a heavy bookshelf. Together, we pushed it against the door, the wood scraping against the floor with a grating noise. I felt a flicker of relief as it stood firm, an impromptu barrier against the darkness outside. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice shaky. "Now we wait and listen," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I glanced around the dim room, noting the shadows that lurked in the corners, and felt a wave of unease wash over me. "Do you think it can get in here?" he asked, his eyes wide with fear. I swallowed hard, the question hanging heavily in the air. "I hope not. But we have to stay quiet and keep our eyes open." We settled into a corner, crouching beneath a pile of old blankets and boxes. The darkness enveloped us like a thick fog, and I could feel the anxiety creeping back into my chest. I wanted to reassure him, but I was terrified too, the uncertainty gnawing at my thoughts. "Why do you think it's after us?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I wish I knew," I replied, trying to piece together the puzzle. "It started with the drawing. I thought it was just my imagination, but it feels so real now. Do you think it's connected to that creature you saw?" I nodded slowly, recalling the shadowy figure I had glimpsed in the mirror. "Maybe. It's like it's feeding off my fears, and now it's feeding off yours too." He shifted beside me, and I could see the reflection of the dim light in his eyes. What if it knows our fears? What if it's trying to break us? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I gripped his hand tightly. We can't let it. We have to fight back. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the front of the house, jolting us both. My heart raced as I strained to hear over the pounding in my chest. "What was that?" he whispered, terror etched across his face. "I don't know," I said, panic flooding my veins. "But we need to be quiet." We held our breaths, listening intently as the whispers returned, louder this time. They swirled around us, a cacophony of voices that felt suffocating. I could hear fragments of words, angry and accusatory, but couldn't piece together their meaning. "You can't hide." The voice was deeper now, resonating through the walls and vibrating in my bones. I shivered, pressing closer to my companion. "It's not just outside," I realized, dread pooling in my stomach. "It's in here with us." "What do we do?" he asked, eyes wide with fear. "Stay calm," I said, forcing the words out despite my racing heart. "We need to confront it. It thrives on fear, and if we let it take control, we're done for." As if responding to my words, the shadows around us began to shift and swirl, creeping closer. I could see dark forms forming within the corners of the room, twisting and contorting as they drew nearer. "Close your eyes," I urged, my voice steadying with purpose. "Focus on your breath. Remember the good things, the things that make you happy. We need to fight back with light." He nodded, squeezing my hand tightly as we both closed our eyes. I concentrated on my favorite memories, my family laughing around the dinner table, the feeling of sunlight on my skin during summer days, the first time I completed a drawing that made me feel proud. I held onto those feelings, allowing them to push back against the darkness. Think of something beautiful, I urged him, my voice a whisper. Something that brings you joy. I could feel his grip tighten, and I imagined him picturing his own cherished moments, drawing strength from them. The shadows around us surged, swirling like a storm, and I could sense their frustration as they were pushed back, if only slightly. Then came a low growl, reverberating through the walls. "You will not escape." The voice echoed through the room, a warning that sent ice coursing through my veins. I could feel the shadows creeping closer, their whispers mixing with the growl, a dark symphony that threatened to drown us. "Keep focusing," I urged, trying to drown out the fear. I pictured a bright light surrounding us, radiating warmth and safety, pushing against the encroaching darkness. "We have to believe it can't get to us. We are stronger together." Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding flash of light. I opened my eyes, momentarily stunned, and saw that the shadows recoiled, twisting and writhing as if in pain. "Keep going," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't let up." The light surged around us, illuminating the room and pushing the shadows back to the corners. I felt a rush of energy, a collective strength radiating from our shared determination. But just as we began to gain ground, the shadows regrouped, darker and more powerful than before. They surged forward, their whispers turning into angry screams, swirling like a storm around us. "You cannot win. You will never be free." The words pierced through my mind, a deep-seated fear clawing at my thoughts. I clutched my companion's hand tighter, fighting to stay grounded amidst the chaos. "We can do this," I shouted, my voice echoing through the storm. "We will not give in." And then, in a moment of clarity, I remembered something crucial. "The mirror," I exclaimed, realization dawning on me. "We have to use it." He looked at me, confusion mingling with fear. "The mirror? What do you mean?" I saw it in my room. The creature, the shadow, was linked to it. If we can face it directly, maybe we can break this cycle. Without waiting for an answer, I leaped to my feet and raced toward the door, determination flooding my veins. I flung it open, the sudden rush of air sending a shiver through the room. The whispers escalated into frantic screams as the shadows surged forward, but I pushed through, adrenaline propelling me forward. My companion followed closely behind, his breath coming in quick bursts. We raced through the house, the oppressive darkness trailing behind us like a vengeful spirit. I could feel the fear gripping my heart, but I focused on the goal, the mirror in my room. Finally, we reached my bedroom door, and I burst inside, flipping on the light. The familiar space was a mess of clothes and sketches, but my eyes were drawn to the mirror hanging on the wall, a dark, ornate frame that felt heavy with unspoken secrets. "Look!" I exclaimed, pointing to the surface of the glass. It shimmered ominously, the reflection distorted like a funhouse mirror. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, hesitating at the threshold. "I have to confront it," I replied, fear mingling with resolve. "I need to see what it wants." With a deep breath, I stepped closer, and the shadows coiled around me, whispering and clawing at my resolve. "You cannot escape." I could see the reflection of my eyes staring back at me, filled with both fear and defiance. The shadows surged behind me, dark tendrils reaching out, but I stood my ground. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice firm. The air grew thick with darkness, swirling around me like a tempest, And then it happened. The surface of the mirror began to ripple, transforming into a swirling abyss. You dare to challenge me? The voice boomed, deep and resonant, sending shockwaves through the air. I'm not afraid of you, I shouted back, feeling the heat of my determination rise. With that declaration, the mirror pulsed, and I could see glimpses of the shadow creature within, a dark silhouette that flickered and writhed, its features indistinct but somehow familiar. What do you want from us? I demanded, my heart racing. Your fears, your doubts, your darkness. The words echoed around me, suffocating and oppressive. But as the shadows pressed in, I felt the strength of my companion beside me, grounding me in reality. Together, I murmured, and he nodded, stepping closer. Together, he echoed, and in that moment, I felt our bond solidify. As one, we reached out, hands outstretched toward the mirror. The shadows recoiled as our light surged forth, pushing against the dark, an explosion of brightness that engulfed the room. The mirror began to shatter, fracturing into a million shards that sparkled in the air like stars. Each fragment captured a moment of light, a memory of joy, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. And oh, the voice roared, furious and desperate. But we pressed on, our combined energy breaking through the shadows, illuminating the darkness that had sought to consume us. In that final moment, as the shards exploded outward, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. We had confronted the darkness, and for the first time, I believed we could truly escape its grip. But even as the shadows began to dissolve, a final whisper echoed through the room, chilling me to the bone. This is not the end. I stumbled back, breathless, the remnants of fear still lingering in my chest. I glanced at my companion, who wore a mixture of shock and disbelief. We did it, he breathed, while filling his voice. Yes, I replied, though deep down, I knew the battle was far from over. We had faced the darkness, but I could sense that it would always be lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness to return. As we stood amidst the shattered remains of the mirror, I realized that while we had survived, we would forever carry the weight of that darkness within us. The shadows may have been vanquished for now, but they would always seek to find their way back. And so, we stepped forward together, ready to confront whatever lay ahead, knowing that our bond was our greatest strength. As the last of the mirror shards fell to the floor, a shimmering cascade of light illuminated the room, dispelling the shadows that had clung to the walls. I felt a sense of victory wash over me, but it was tinged with an unsettling realization that we had escaped this confrontation. The essence of the darkness still lingered, like a bad dream that refuses to fade upon waking. What now? My companion asked, his voice trembling with residual fear. The echoes of the creature's voice still hung heavy in the air, a reminder that our fight was not yet over. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. We need to find a way to protect ourselves, I replied, scanning the room for anything that might help us understand or confront this entity. It won't stop until it gets what it wants. He nodded, his expression serious. But what does it want? Why is it after us? I turned to face him, the weight of the moment pressing down on my shoulders. I think it feeds off our fears and doubts. It wants us to feel helpless, to feel alone. As I spoke, my gaze fell on the remnants of the mirror scattered across the floor. Each shard reflected not just light, but fragments of our struggles, our fears. I felt an idea forming in my mind, one that could potentially offer us some form of protection against the shadows. If it thrives on fear, maybe we can turn that around. We need to face our fears, acknowledge them, rather than let them control us. He looked at me, confusion flickering across his face. You mean, confront our fears directly? How do we even begin to do that? I walked over to the largest piece of the shattered mirror, its surface still glinting with residual light. We can start by acknowledging what we're afraid of. You have to look into it and see your fear for what it is, not what it wants you to believe. But what if it shows us something worse? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Then we face it together, I reassured him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Whatever it is, we'll handle it as a team. You're not alone in this. Taking a moment to gather my thoughts, I drew in a deep breath and stepped closer to the mirror shard. I'll go first. As I peered into the reflection, I saw not just my image, but a swirling vortex of darkness behind me, an abyss filled with all my insecurities, doubts, and fears. I could feel the pull of the shadows, tugging at my confidence. Images flashed before my eyes, moments of failure, isolation, and the profound fear of being abandoned. But instead of shrinking back, I focused on each moment, allowing myself to feel the pain associated with them. I see you, I whispered to the shadows, feeling the intensity of their presence. You are not me. You do not define who I am. To my surprise, the shadows recoiled slightly, the pull of their darkness weakening. It was as if acknowledging them took away their power. Your turn, I called over my shoulder, gesturing for my companion to approach. He hesitated, glancing nervously at the swirling darkness behind me. What if it's too much? I smiled reassuringly, despite the fear churning in my gut. Just remember, we're in this together. I won't let it take you. With a determined nod, he stepped forward, standing beside me in front of the mirror. His reflection flickered, revealing not just his image but the weight of his own fears, unfulfilled expectations, the fear of failure, and the haunting idea of never being enough. Breathe, I urged, standing firm next to him. You can do this. He took a deep breath, and I could see the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. I see it, he murmured, his voice trembling. It's there, but it's not who I am. Yes, I exclaimed, a surge of hope filling me. Let it go. You have the strength to push it away. As he focused on his fears, the shadows around us pulsed, becoming more frenzied. They writhed and twisted, desperate to reclaim the power we were taking back. I'm not afraid of you, he shouted, his voice gaining strength. You can't control me. With those words, the shadows screamed, their voice a cacophony of rage and despair. They recoiled, the darkness pulling back momentarily, as if caught off guard by his declaration. Keep going, I urged, my heart racing as the light around us flickered with intensity. This is your moment. He nodded, pushing against the dark with every ounce of willpower he could muster. I won't let you take me, he shouted, and with that, the shadows erupted in a chaotic whirlwind, threatening to envelop us both. The mirror shards began to vibrate, resonating with the energy of our defiance. This ends now, I declared, feeling the heat of our combined strength burning against the darkness. Together, we took a step forward, hand in hand, confronting the shadows that loomed before us. The darkness swirled violently, its whispers morphing into incoherent screams. You will pay, it bellowed, but we stood our ground, determination fueling our resolve. Suddenly, a blinding light surged from the shards, illuminating the room and casting away the shadows. The light felt warm and protective, wrapping around us like a comforting embrace, banishing the darkness that had sought to consume us. As the shadows disintegrated, I felt a rush of relief wash over me. The air in the room grew lighter, and I turned to my companion, who wore a look of astonishment. We did it, he breathed, eyes shining with disbelief. Yes. I laughed, the sound bubbling up from deep within me. We faced it together. We showed it our strength. But just as joy began to swell in my chest, a chilling reminder echoed in my mind. But it's not over. The light flickered, casting a shadow across the room, and I could feel the remnants of darkness lurking just beyond the edges of our newfound victory. We have to stay vigilant. It could come back. Then we'll be ready, he replied, determination hardening his features. Together, we began to clear the remnants of the shattered mirror, our hands moving in unison as we picked up the pieces. Each shard felt like a symbol of our victory, a reminder of the battle we had fought. Maybe we can use these shards as a way to remind ourselves of our strength, I suggested, holding up a small piece that glinted in the light. We can create something powerful, something that reflects our courage. He grinned, his spirit lifting. Like a new mirror? One that reflects who we really are? Exactly, I said, feeling a spark of excitement. We can create a piece of art that represents our journey, something to empower us whenever we feel doubt creeping back in. As we began to gather the shards, I felt a sense of hope bloom within me. We had faced the darkness and survived, and now we had the power to reshape our reality. But even as we worked together, I could sense a shadow lurking in the back of my mind, a whisper that reminded me of the creature's final words, "This is not the end." With each shard we collected, I resolved to remain vigilant. We would take back our power, but the darkness was a patient predator, always lurking, always waiting for the opportunity to strike again. Together, we would not only rebuild but forge ahead, ready to confront whatever shadows might come our way. And as we began to create, I felt the weight of fear lift just a little more, replaced by the light of determination and the bonds we had forged in our fight against the unseen. As we gathered the fragments of the shattered mirror, a sense of purpose filled the air, mingling with the remnants of fear that still clung to us. Each piece we collected felt like a small victory, a symbol of our resilience in the face of the unknown. I could feel the energy shift around us. The air seemed to vibrate with our determination, transforming the once oppressive atmosphere into something lighter and brighter. "Let's set up a workspace," I suggested, glancing around the room for a suitable surface. My eyes landed on the old wooden table tucked against the wall, covered in dust but sturdy enough to hold our creations. "Good idea," my companion replied, a spark of enthusiasm igniting in his eyes. "We can start putting the pieces together right now." We moved to the table, brushing off the dust and debris that had accumulated over the years. As we arranged the shards, I began to envision what our new mirror might look like, a mosaic of light and color that reflected not just our journey but also our growth. "Let's make it colorful," I proposed, glancing at him. "Each shard can represent a moment we faced our fears, a reminder that we have the power to overcome anything." "Like a rainbow," he added, his face lighting up with excitement. "A reminder that there's always light after the storm." "Yes. Exactly." I smiled, feeling the warmth of our shared vision. "We can add paint to the shards too, colors that symbolize strength and courage." As we set to work, I felt a profound sense of camaraderie between us. We weren't just piecing together a broken mirror, we were crafting a testament to our resilience. Each shard we glued down was accompanied by stories and laughter, memories of moments when we had felt small but had found the strength to rise. "Do you remember that time at the park when we thought we lost the football?" he asked, chuckling as he meticulously arranged a blue shard. "Yeah." I laughed, recalling the panic we felt as we searched for it, only to find it wedged between the bushes. We were convinced it was gone forever, but it turned out to be right under our noses. "That's just like our fears," he mused, nodding thoughtfully. They can seem so big and overwhelming, but often they're just hiding in the shadows, waiting for us to find them. Exactly, I replied, gluing a vibrant green shard in place. And by confronting them, we can pull them into the light, just like we're doing now. As we worked, the room gradually transformed. What had once been a space filled with dread and uncertainty was now vibrant and alive with color and hope. The mosaic began to take shape, reflecting our journey, our struggles, and ultimately, our triumph. But even as the mirror came together, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was still lurking just beyond our vision, biding its time. I glanced toward the window, half expecting to see shadows gathering outside, but the night sky remained clear, dotted with stars. Do you think we'll ever truly be free of it? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. The darkness, I mean. He paused, looking thoughtful as he added a bright yellow shard to the mosaic. Maybe freedom isn't about getting rid of the darkness completely, he said slowly. Maybe it's about learning to live with it, to understand it, and to not let it control us. His words resonated deeply within me. Perhaps he was right. The darkness might always be there, a shadow at the edge of our lives, but it didn't have to define us. We had the power to reclaim our lives, to fill them with light and hope, and to remind ourselves that we could withstand the storms. Let's finish this, I declared, determination surging within me. And then, laying it somewhere we can see it every day, like a shield against the shadows. Great idea, he replied, enthusiasm lighting up his eyes once more. It'll be our daily reminder of how strong we're together. With renewed energy, we dove back into our work, gluing the final pieces of the mosaic in place. As we added the last few shards, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over me. We had turned something broken into something beautiful, a reflection of our journey from fear to empowerment. Finally, we stood back to admire our creation. The new mirror sparkled with colors, each shard catching the light in a dance of brightness. It felt alive, pulsating with the energy of our shared experience. It's perfect, I breathed, a sense of pride swelling in my chest. It really is, he agreed, a smile spreading across his face. And look at all the colors, each one tells a story. As we took in the vibrant mosaic, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had faced our fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged stronger than before. The shadows may always be there, lurking, but we had built our armor, a reminder of our strength, our bond, and the light we could create together. But just as the calm enveloped us, a chilling whisper drifted through the air, sending a shiver down my spine. This is not the end. I turned to my companion, heart racing. Did you hear that? He nodded, his expression shifting from elation to concern. Yes. It's still here, isn't it? Maybe we should be prepared, I suggested, glancing at the mosaic. If it's going to come back, we need to be ready to face it again. Right, he replied, determination flashing in his eyes. We'll keep this mirror as our symbol of strength, and we'll face whatever comes next together. With that promise, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey we had taken together had transformed us, but it was only the beginning. We would remain vigilant, ready to confront the darkness whenever it dared to re-emerge. And as we stood side by side, I knew that whatever shadows awaited us, we had the strength to face them. Together, we would be unbreakable, our bond a beacon of light against the encroaching night. As the last remnants of darkness faded, we hung our new mirror on the wall, the vibrant colors shining brightly. It was a declaration of our resilience, a promise that we would never allow fear to hold us captive again. The future may have been uncertain, but one thing was clear, we would confront it head on, hand in hand, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And with that resolve, I felt hope blossom within me, a light that would guide us through even the darkest of times. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.